powerful opening statements in the Hollywood overdose murder trial. David Pierce and Brant Osborne on trial for the deaths of two women, model Christy Giles and her architect friend Hilda Cabrales.
This trial will not change what happened and will not bring my sister back or Christy.
Christy's plan for the evening was to go out with some friends and have a fun night.
Aloha!
My name is Jan Celia, and Christy was my wife. Christy loved to spread joy and laughter wherever she went. Hilda Marcela just moved from Mexico. She seemed very lovely, and they were becoming fast friends.
My sister did enjoy going out to parties. She liked dancing and the music. I remember seeing her Instagram. She was posting stories of that night.
She sent me a couple of text messages. Her last text message to me was around 1 or 2 a.m. And throughout the day, I was trying to text her, and there was no response.
You're tracking Christy's phone.
Yeah.
Is this an address that you recognize?
It's not an address I know. Around 5 p.m., I saw her location had suddenly moved to an emergency room hospital. My level of panic is growing and growing. I just knew that I had to try and get to the bottom of what happened.
You blast out this address, and very quickly you get responses.
Yeah.
What are those responses?
That there's somebody that lives at this location that is a very unsavory person.
David Pierce.
Yeah. He passed himself off as a big shot Hollywood producer, but he was a con man with an alleged history of sexual assault.
It wasn't clear what happened. We just knew she overdosed, and to me, my reaction was, who did this to her?
So when you heard overdose, you immediately thought drugged.
Yeah, drugged.
Yeah.
Definitely not something that she would have done to herself ever. It's just not her.
Got a call at home, apparent overdose. Christy, she was deceased. Hilda was still on life support at that time.
I give as much information as I can to the detectives.
Jan had put a number of things out on social media, and it spread like wildfire. People recognized this guy right away, and they were urged to call us.
Authorities say 7 more women have come forward claiming Pierce sexually assaulted them as well.
Jane Doe number 1, Jane Doe number 2, Jane Doe number 3, number 4, number 5, number 6, number 7.
Being a Jane Doe, we are the voice of both Christy and Hilda because they can't talk.
Defendant Pierce wanted them to die. He wanted them to die because dead girls don't talk.
For a fresh case, it's all on you. There's no one else is gonna solve this thing for you. It's you and your partner, that's it.
And in November 2021, Detective Jonathan Vanderlei and Detective Calvin Yu had to figure out why a lifeless woman was left at this emergency room. This video from Southern California Hospital shows staff pulling a woman out of a black Prius and helping her onto a stretcher while 2 men look on. When the stretcher moves into the ER, it becomes clear the car has no license plates. Detective Vanderlei would later learn that the 2 men told the staff they found the woman, quote, passed out on the curb somewhere nearby, and they were trying to be good Samaritans. They left without giving their names or phone numbers.
They were masked, disguised.
This must be adding up to something that sounds very sketchy to you.
Very sketchy, but then you still have to figure out if an actual crime occurred.
The woman was Christy Giles, and her mother, Dusty, will never forget the call that came from the hospital, telling her her 24-year-old daughter was dead from a drug overdose.
And I said, "What do you mean she didn't make it?" And then I hung up and I fell apart.
2 hours later, at a hospital just 2 miles away, a second woman was left at another emergency room by the same two men, also in a black Prius and wearing masks.
They never give their names, never leave their phone numbers, license plates, anything like that.
That was Hilda Marcela Cabrales. The 26-year-old architect was still alive in the ICU and fighting for her life. And in Durango, Mexico, her mother, Hilda Marcela Plasencia, was getting the news about her eldest daughter and namesake.
She was very bad. She was intubated.
You are a doctor. What was going on in your mind at the time?
What happened? What happened to her? Why is she that bad?
And in the earliest hours of the investigation, there were only questions. How could this happen to Christy? It was an unimaginable ending to a life bursting with exuberance.
Let's do some donuts!
Christy was an adventurer, traveling the world as a high-fashion model for Wilhelmina. She ultimately made LA her home.
Christy Giles, I live in Venice, California, and I am an artist.
At 21, her life took a dramatic turn. She met Jan Sillier, a South African-born artist, photographer, and special effects editor, 17 years her senior. They'd been together 7 months when the couple went to Burning Man, an arts festival in the Nevada desert, where impulsively they took a big leap.
We just decided to elope. We just got married right there. We said to each other that, you know, life's very short, so we kind of really just proposed to each other, and the next day we got married.
After they got married, Christy started studying interior design in Los Angeles, which led to a new friendship with Hilda Marcela. Hilda had just moved there to start her dream job, recalls her father, Luis.
I feel very happy for her, but very sad for me because we are very close.
No one was surprised that the cum laude graduate of the prestigious university in Monterrey, Mexico, was thriving in LA, especially her sister Fernanda.
She was always making a lot of friends, talkative, outgoing, just having a good time and meeting people that they also like the music, that they are also enjoying dancing.
Dancing, as this video shows, is what the two friends were doing that night. Christy's husband, Jan, was out of town visiting his father. He knew she and Hilda had planned a girls' night out, starting at Soho House, and then onto a warehouse party after midnight to see a favorite DJ. A friend who was with them said they did ketamine, a popular club drug. But by the next day, Jan was on his way home, knowing Christy was gone.
In less than 24 hours, your world was turned upside down.
Shattered. Yeah.
Hilda's father and mother rushed to be by her side. When they arrived, they found their daughter on life support.
My heart broke in 1,000 pieces because I saw my baby unconscious. I'm fighting for her life.
I said, "Is this real? Am I dreaming?" I took her hand and I said, "Mom's here with you. You're not alone."
Christy's autopsy revealed that in addition to ketamine, she had cocaine, fentanyl, and GHB, known as the date rape drug, in her system.
Are these drugs that Christy would take willingly?
I mean, that combination of drugs sounds deadly to me, so, like, no.
Jan needed answers, so he began to build a timeline based on the digital trail Christy left behind, information gathered from her messages and phone, which he was able to track.
I wanted to get to the bottom of exactly what happened that night.
He already knew what she'd been doing before she went out for the evening.
She was enjoying a lovely sunset. She took our cat for a walk on the beach.
Sand Panther, oh, whoa.
Those were the last pictures she sent me of herself. And she said, I wish you were here, and I will forever wish that I was there too.
Jan was able to track Christy's phone to a residence located at 8641 West Olympic Boulevard. At 5:30 a.m., Christy sends Hilda a wide-eye emoji and says, "Let's go." Hilda replies, "I'll call an Uber." 10 minutes away.
The fact that they're both in the same house, text messaging each other, they need to leave, is very worrying.
That was the last text message that Christy or Hilda ever sent. That Uber arrived, waited 5 minutes, and drove away, empty.
How did you process that?
I mean, it's just confirming my worst fears again, that they were there at that place against their will.
What's going on in your mind from that detective standpoint when you're about to arrive at a scene?
You don't want to form an opinion prior to getting there, but you are kind of mulling over the evidence. You're thinking about it, you're thinking about what questions you want to ask.
Acting on information supplied by Jan, LAPD detective Jonathan Vanderley and his partner headed here to 8641 West Olympic Boulevard a little after midnight on November 14th, only a few hours after getting that call from the second hospital.
And this is where the Uber that Christy and Hilda called that night would have waited.
Right out front, yep.
10 minutes between life and death.
That's all it takes.
It was the home of 39-year-old David Pierce. Police would learn Christy and Hilda had met him for the first time at that warehouse party. Police also discovered Pierce had a registration for a black Prius and found it parked behind the building. It matched the car seen at both hospitals down to the black rims. Pierce lived on the second floor with a roommate, Brant Osborne, 42.
There was a light on in the upstairs where the two men live. So I just went up, knocked on the door. Immediately, the lights go out.
You identify yourself.
Yes, completely. LAPD, open the door, and then just complete silence.
After about 15 minutes, he says, Pierce and Osborne came out. Pierce denied owning a Prius.
So I immediately get a lie.
Do you leave?
No, I interview Mr. Osborne.
At first, he says, Osborne denied seeing Christy and Hilda at all.
He changes his stories numerous times. At first, there's no girls had been at that location whatsoever. I tell him on the interview, listen, I know you're lying. It's extremely obvious. You're very nervous.
Vanderlei says Osborne eventually admitted the women had been at their apartment, but said he'd been asleep, and when he woke up, realized Christy and Hilda were in distress. He said he and Pierce chose to go to two separate hospitals because, quote, we didn't know how it would look. Pierce, police say, did later admit he owned the Prius, but lied again, saying his license plates had been stolen. Vanderlei says he saw those plates on the ground by the vehicle. Then the men agreed to let detectives inside.
2 beds had been stripped. There was a washing machine that had been recently used. It was still wet.
Is anything else that stands out to you?
There was a safe in his room with baggies, which is indicative of narcotics. He said they're for crafts, for arts and crafts.
By now, Vanderlei says he knew Pierce and Osborne had dropped Hilda and Christy off and believed Pierce had drugged them. but he didn't have enough evidence to make an arrest.
He thought he beat us that night for sure. He was happy.
He smiled and said goodbye.
Yeah.
Thanks, detectives.
Yep.
But that wasn't where it ended for you.
No, not by a long shot.
Vanderlee knew he needed more evidence and turned to his colleague, Detective Calvin Yu.
You hear the name David Pierce. What goes on in your mind?
Well, the first thing is, who did he sexually assault this time?
Detective Yu had investigated Pierce in 2020 for sexually assaulting a 19-year-old.
She was raped while she was unconscious.
The victim said Pierce had given her drugs to knock her out during a date, but the investigation had stalled and wasn't prosecuted at the time. Detective Yu knew Pierce had other prior charges, including another rape charge from 2014 that was also not prosecuted.
He has a pattern. His first step is trying to find his victim. So that could be through a dating app, through online listings, or meeting them at bars or events. When he picks his victim, he goes to step 2, which is bragging about himself.
Pierce relies on lies, detectives say, to set his trap.
He needed to introduce himself as a producer, as a doctor, all these different things. He's none of these things. I think he might have been an intern at the time or something at a production company.
An intern?
Yeah.
They say his next step is to drug his victims and incapacitate them, often with a drink.
After they take this drink, he goes to step 4, which is the sexual assault.
Police would learn both Christy and Hilda showed signs of sexual assault, but they feared they would face challenges making the case.
How difficult is it to prove a crime took place when the victims were recreationally using drugs?
This makes the case extremely hard. I told Jan early on that this was going to be a near impossible a case to prove.
Yeah, at first it's a whodunit. It just became what actually happened, and that's what was the difficulty of this case.
Detective Jonathan Vanderlee says the pressure was on to locate any evidence of what happened after Christy and Hilda met David Pierce that night.
Video starts expiring. These DVRs, it's a constant. You got to get this evidence before it disappears.
Police did have some luck, starting with this footage from outside that warehouse party, which they say shows the women leaving with Pierce, Osborne, and a friend of theirs, 47-year-old Michael Ansbach, on their way to Pierce's apartment. Police also uncovered this text exchange from moments earlier when the women were still inside that party. "Do you want Coke?" asks Hilda. "Yes," replies Christy. Hilda texted back, "I'm in the kitchen. Let's do a line." Witnesses say Pierce supplied that cocaine, which Jan says was not a common choice for Christy.
Maybe it was late at night and she wanted to get less high. It's not something she would do regularly.
Police determined the group arrived at Pierce's apartment a little after 5 a.m. The women aren't seen again until 11 hours later, when at 4:30 in the afternoon, a security camera recorded this grainy image showing Pierce with Christy over his shoulder at the top of the stairs. Police say Osborne is carrying her bag. 35 minutes later at the hospital, Pierce, wearing a black sweatshirt, helps take Christy's body out of the car. Osborne looks on. A full hour and a half later, this dark image shows the men leaving the apartment again with Hilda. Police say Pierce is carrying her and Osborne has her boots and coat. Half an hour later, the Prius arrives at that second hospital where the men take Hilda out of the car together. It had been more than 13 hours since Christy texted Hilda, "Let's go." For 2 weeks, Hilda was on life support. With no hope of regaining consciousness, her family gathered to say their goodbyes.
Hilda, what were your final moments with your daughter?
They were so hard, you know. And I just was asking God to not let her suffer more.
I remember telling her that you can leave. And just thanking her for being my sister.
I told her, maybe when I pass away, I will see you again. And I gave you a big hug, a kiss.
The family decided to donate Hilda's organs. Her mom remembers the medical staff lining the halls as the family accompanied Hilda to the OR.
The medical team was clapping to honor her, to say thank you for giving life to others.
Like Christy, Hilda had suffered a drug overdose. Toxicology reports would later reveal that she had cocaine, MDMA or ecstasy, and elevated levels of fentanyl in her system. Police would also learn that while the women were in that apartment, the downstairs neighbor heard someone in pain and moaning on and off for 6 hours. Police believe that was Hilda. Neither Pierce nor Osborne nor Ansbach called for help.
It makes me get angry because she was suffering and nobody helped her.
How hard is it to prove this narrative when the victims can't even testify on their own behalf?
If we were just investigating Christy and Hilda's alone, very difficult.
But the district attorney at the time went public, asking other women who knew Pierce to call in so police could better understand what he did to Hilda and Christy.
If you feel comfortable moving forward so that we can evaluate your case and charge it, we're here for you.
We started getting a lot of calls.
As police continued building their case, Jan received a call that Pierce and Osborne were on the move. He recorded this video of the men loading up a moving van the day after Hilda died. Police say Pierce had also changed his phone number, and it took them a week to locate him again.
So the pressure is on. You got to get this guy.
I got to come up with something quick, yes.
Police have arrested 3 men in connection with the deaths of a model and her friend last month.
On December 15, 2021, David Pierce, Brant Osborne, and Michael Ansbach were arrested in connection with Hilda and Christy's deaths. The detectives still knew next to nothing about what had happened inside that apartment. Vanderlee says they decided to take a gamble and bring the men in.
This is the only way we're going to get the info we need.
Once the men were in custody, police conducted interviews with them, one by one.
Kind of played with the rotation, and it worked out exceedingly well.
They secretly recorded Pierce and Osborne while Ansbach was talking to police.
Pierce says, I hope Ansbach's not up there telling him I gave them drugs and wine.
When it was his turn, Pierce denied giving the women drugs.
He was told it was like a very bad batch of fentanyl that was going around.
This was suspicious because information that the women had likely died from fentanyl had not been released.
I knew these girls died from fentanyl, but nobody else knew.
2 months after his arrest, Ansbach reached out to police with details of what he says he witnessed that night. He says Pierce had offered the women a ride to an after party and then said he needed to make a quick stop at his house. Ansbach says Pierce was very insistent they stay and have a drink. And after the women talked about leaving, Pierce gave all 3 of them so-called special cocaine. Ansbach says he, Christy and Hilda got sick immediately, and when he woke up hours later, he saw Christy without any signs of life. Ansbach says he told Pierce to take Christy and Hilda to the hospital, and says Pierce then said repeatedly, quote, "Dead girls don't talk."
I wouldn't say survivor. I'm a fighter. That's what I am.
But police had at least one woman who could talk about David Pierce at his upcoming trial.
He asked me if I wanted a drink, but it tasted really funny. And then I don't remember the next several hours after that.
January 9th, 2025. Opening arguments begin in the trial of David Pierce, charged with felony murder, and Brant Osborne, charged with accessory after the fact.
The evidence will show that the defendant knowingly gave Hilda and Chrissy GHB and fentanyl, knowing that it was dangerous to their lives, knowing that it could kill them, but he just didn't care. Defendant Osborne helped him get rid of any evidence to implicate Defendant Pierce in the deaths of Christy and Hilda.
Prosecutor Catherine Mariano has marshaled the forensic evidence to make her case. The toxicology results that found fentanyl in both women and the date rape drug GHB in Christy. Also, Pierce's DNA discovered on Christy's body and under Hilda's fingernails.
This is no accident. This is no mistake.
But in order to prove felony murder, she must show that Pierce incapacitated Christy and Hilda to rape them. Without their testimony, she needs to establish he had a history of doing this to other women, putting drugs in their drinks, and then sexually assaulting them.
He didn't care whether they lived or died. All he cared about was taking advantage of them.
Here's where there's a problem.
But defense attorney Jeff Vall says the fact that Christy and Hilda were using drugs before meeting Pierce that night means there is no case for murder.
These young ladies unfortunately ingested fentanyl and they died. It's a shame. But Mr. Pierce didn't kill them.
Vall is sixth in a long line of lawyers who have represented David Pierce in this case. He knows his client is problematic.
He's very demanding. He's very sure of himself. What David Pierce wants, David Pierce gets.
He pushes her onto the bed.
Mariano has her own version of who David Pierce is, based on the accounts of the women who talked to investigators and chose to be anonymous.
Jane Doe 1. Jane Doe number 2. Jane Doe number 3. Number 4, 5, or 6. Number 7.
It was important for me to come forward and, get any information I could regarding this vile man.
Jackie is Jane Doe number 2. No cameras were allowed in the courtroom for any of the testimony, but she agreed to talk with us about her experience with Pierce in 2010, when she was a 24-year-old law student looking for a room to rent. She testified about her meeting with Pierce at his apartment on West Olympic Boulevard, where he gave her a tour and offered a drink.
I started to spin and, I just became disoriented.
You drink this drink, you start to feel dizzy, I'm sure confused. What happens next?
So the next thing I know, he was, basically trying to rape me. So I started fighting him back.
According to Jackie, he continued to assault her.
He threw me onto the floor. He punched me in the face.
When she tried to take her phone out, he grabbed her arm so hard, the phone flew and smashed into the wall. Unsteady on her feet and unable to call for help, she did everything she could to escape.
I had to crawl down the stairs. I was so disoriented, and crawl down West Olympic Boulevard to my car, screaming for help.
Though seriously injured and traumatized, she did not report it.
There's a huge stigma that surrounds women that come forward with sexual assault.
But when she heard about Christy and Hilda, she decided to act. In all, 20 women came forward. Pierce was charged with 7 sexual assaults. Detective Calvin Yu thinks that's just a fraction of those who suffered at the hands of David Pierce.
Are there more Jane Does out there?
Yes, I would definitely say so.
How many do you believe?
I say 100.
100. That's incredible, and that's just based on the people that you have spoken with directly.
Yes.
I'm just so grateful that they came forward, and I can't even imagine how the level of bravery that you have to have in order to testify to a room of strangers that you were so intimately violated.
And as the women testified one by one, defense attorney Vall could see what was happening. The prosecution strategy was working.
The victims come into court testifying, some who broke down in tears, all gave the same testimony, and I am watching the jury. They're looking at him, and the expression on the jurors' faces are like, how could you? How could you do this?
After the Jane Does testified, the prosecution called Pierce's friend, Michael Ansbach, who was in the apartment that night and later arrested along with Pierce and Osborne. Ansbach took this video of Christy and Hilda minutes after Pierce gave them wine and cocaine at the apartment.
Christy's lying on the couch. It looks like she's on her way to becoming unconscious.
In his testimony, Ansbach again said he also used the same cocaine, got violently ill, and then passed out. When he woke up, he said Pierce asked him to check on Christy, and when he did, Ansbach said it looked like she was not breathing. Hilda, he said, was in Pierce's bedroom. According to Ansbach, this is when Pierce told him, "Dead girls don't talk." Like Pierce and Osborne, Ansbach never called for help. His charges were later dropped. On day 11, and against the advice of his attorney, David Pierce, who pleaded not guilty, was sworn in and testified.
So he got on his stand and he did his best to try to say everybody was wrong and he was right.
He was apparently the only one telling the truth at the entire trial.
On the 12th day, Pierce's roommate, Brant Osborne, who also pleaded not guilty, takes the stand.
So Osborne's role was to help get rid of the bodies, first and foremost. He helped carry the girls at first. He helped formulate the plan in terms of what they're going to tell the security guards.
Osborne testified he was dumbfounded by Pierce's behavior and was emotional, crying more than once on the stand, saying he played no part in a cover-up because he didn't have a complete picture of what was really going on. Jan, for one, was not buying it.
He's basically claiming to be an innocent bystander in the situation and that he's also a victim in the situation, but there are facts that prove that he helped David Pierce cover it up.
The question is whether the jury will believe either man. After 3 weeks, the trial took a toll on Christy's family.
We sat and had to hold our mouth closed while they battered, and I feel like they destroyed my daughter's reputation.
It was definitely difficult being in the same room as them. Did I have an overwhelming urge to throw something really hard at their heads? Yeah.
In closing, Prosecutor Mariano hits back at the defense. Just because Christy and Hilda did drugs on their own that night doesn't make them responsible for their own deaths. David Pierce took care of that, Mariano argued.
He didn't care about violating them in the most awful way. He didn't care that by drugging Christy and Hilda, that they could die.
And she repeats the words of Ansbach attributed to David Pierce, the words that rang in the ears of everyone who loved Christy and Hilda.
He wanted them to die because dead girls don't talk.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody.
Attorneys for Osborne and Pierce told jurors there simply was not enough direct evidence linking them to the crime, and that there's a strong case for reasonable doubt. Now it's up to the jury to draw its own conclusion about Brant Osborne and David Pierce. Justy Giles made her decision a long time ago.
Pierce is a sick, slimy lizard that sits and preys and sneaks, and his bite is deadly.
As we're sitting here waiting on the verdict for the case, I just want to, I'm here for it till the end.
For Christy's family, it's been a long and wrenching road to get here.
For you, what does justice for Christy look like?
I mean, there's no justice for Christy. There's only preventing him from doing it again, I think. That's the only justice we can get.
And for Hilda's mother, who could not travel to be in court, the last 3 years without her daughter have been its own trial.
Nothing can bring her back again, but the hole she lives in our lives will be always there.
February 4th, 2025, after 2 days of deliberations, the jury is back.
Matter of the people of the state of California versus David Brian Pierce. We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, David Brian Pierce, guilty of the crime of first-degree murder upon Christy Giles.
David Pierce, guilty.
We get that guilty on the first one, and sigh of relief.
Guilty of the crime of first-degree murder upon Hilda Marcela Cabrera Arzola.
Hilda comes up, guilty again, another sigh of relief.
And then guilty of all the sexual assaults of 7 Jane Does.
I don't think I breathed at all until I heard a guilty on every single one.
A lot of relief, not just for my sake, but definitely for all of the victims.
Jane Does finally had their day in court and were believed.
I felt this huge weight released off me. It was almost like a euphoric feeling. We showed the jury what kind of man this is.
But the jury is deadlocked when it comes to Brant Osborne. A mistrial is declared.
I was surprised, definitely disappointed at the hung jury. I thought the trial made clear that he had definitely a hand in their deaths.
What is there to question? He was aware of Christy's and Hilda's condition. He's a grown man that stands on his own 2 feet. He withheld medical help from Hilda and Christy until they were dead.
I'm not happy. They perfectly could save her life, and they chose to not do it. For me, that's not justice, at least in that part.
I am here standing for me and Hilda's mom, Marcella.
Now, there's an unbreakable bond between the mothers who must live without their daughters.
Our daughters individually were like soul sisters. Both of them lost their souls at the hand of the same man, same way, and that will be forever entwined.
And before she leaves the courthouse, there is a final plea from Dusty.
As much as it hurts to lose my baby girl, her body was able to tell the story. And her sharing her location, technology told us where she was, how long she was. So please, within your own families, share locations. You never know when you're gonna not be able to get in touch with somebody.
When you look at photos of Christy and Hilda, what do you see?
I see beauty. I see myself when I was 24. I will remember them as strong, independent women. I'll remember them as beautiful souls, free spirits, women that were coming to LA to pursue their dreams.
2 young women who loved their families,
Sandpaper.
their animals, and their lives.
I want to remember her as the bright, beautiful soul that she was.
Fernanda, how do you hope your big sister is remembered?
As someone who had a lot of dreams, ambitions, very intelligent, funny, she was happy to be alive.
Need more time with 48 Hours? Go deep behind every true crime episode with first-hand accounts from 48 Hours Investigations.
Were you at all prepared for what happened in this case?
Shock is the word that comes to mind.
Get inside the twists and turns and get in on the case. Listen to Postmortem from 48 Hours, now available wherever you get your podcasts. Now, a special 2-part edition of 48 Hours.
Four young women, 3 murdered, 1 left to tell the story. The Hollywood Ripper.
He's been called a serial sexual thrill killer.
Hollywood, 2001.
A 22-year-old believed to be actor Ashton Kutcher's girlfriend is stabbed to death.
They were going to be hanging out.
The injuries that she suffered were horrific.
El Monte, California, 2005.
A 32-year-old woman is stabbed in her home.
There was slashing and cutting. There were multiple stab wounds, not just a couple.
Santa Monica, 2008.
A young woman is woken up by a man attacking her with a knife.
She was stabbed multiple times in her chest and shoulder and right arm. She fought. She stood up and she fought.
They were all young, they were all attractive, they were all female.
The media started calling him the Hollywood Ripper. But had he killed others? That was the question investigators more than 1,800 miles away outside Chicago had been wrestling with. It would take a 48 hours investigation to find the answer.
Rex, where was Gertrude Laser?
The window was this window.
Outside Chicago, 1993.
The murder happened here in the middle of the night. Someone jumped out of the bushes and stabbed 18-year-old Trisha Piccaccio to death.
My daughter Trisha was murdered when she was 18 years old.
I was the one who found her. I woke up and I had a cup of coffee and I was going out to my van. And I just happened to see 2 little tennis shoes sticking up by the side door. And when I saw it was her, I dropped the coffee cup.
Who would do this to her? Why would anybody do this?
She was a nice girl.
I died right then and there.
We were told that we have to understand that some murders go unsolved. And I was like, there is no way somebody is going to come to my door, outside my door, and do this and get away with it.
He's cold. He's devious. He's a predator. And we've got ourselves a serial killer.
They never saw it coming. Tricia, Ashley, Maria, Michelle. The trial of an accused serial killer has dominated the headlines here in Los Angeles. He is known as the Hollywood Ripper.
May it please the court, the methodical and systematic slaughter of women. That's what this case is about.
It is not overstating it to say this is a sensational murder trial.
Ashton.
On the witness list, Ashton Kutcher. He was scheduled to go on a date with one of the victims the night she was murdered.
Ashton Kutcher talked about what would have been his first date with one of the murder victims.
For me, this story begins near my home just outside Chicago.
One question has haunted this quiet Glenview community. Who killed Tricia Piccaccio and why?
The murder of Tricia Piccaccio is a case we've been working on since the summer of 2008. It took years to gain her parents' trust, that maybe somehow by telling Tricia's story, we could help catch her killer. It wasn't long after sunrise on the morning of August 14th, 1993.
I was going out to my van, and when I saw it was her, I ran over there and saw what happened to her.
Rick Piccaccio had just walked out the garage when, out of the corner of his eye, he saw his 18-year-old daughter, Tricia, splayed out on the landing, stabbed to death.
I tried to revive her. That is the worst feeling in your life, when you can't do nothing for somebody you love.
I remember just waking up to this blood-curdling scream of my father, and it was, "Doug, call 911, Doug, call 911.
Tricia's brother, Doug.
I don't really want to describe the details of what I saw.
That's okay.
I have nightmares about it all the time.
The police arrived, and Rick had to make a difficult call to his wife, Diane.
He called me at work and said, "You have to come home. Tricia's hurt."
I heard a lady screaming, and the mother had just exited her vehicle, and she was running towards Trish.
Officer Ray Salevich saw her pull up.
I basically tackled her, and I didn't want her to see Trish like this and remember her daughter like that.
Who would do this to her? There is nobody that knew her that would do this to her. My daughter never did anything to put herself in harm's way.
No.
She was the type of girl that you knew where she was, what she was doing, and you never had to worry about her.
Tricia was also the type of girl who made the most of high school. She took calculus, was on the debate team, and played clarinet in the band. At the time of her murder, she was just a few days away from moving on to the next chapter in her young and exciting life as a freshman at Purdue University.
She had a great attitude about everything, and she knew what she wanted out of life.
Were you close with her?
Tricia was an amazing girl, was probably one of the most energetic and happy people I've ever seen.
Tricia's close friend Karen Jones spent a lot of time at the Piccaccio house.
Her mom was very caring and treated us all like her children.
Tricia's younger brothers, 17-year-old Doug and 13-year-old Tommy, often had their friends over.
I fed the whole neighborhood. Everybody ate there.
They were just a very warm family.
On the night of August 13th, Karen, Tricia, and most of the kids from their senior class went out. One last hurrah for the summer.
That night, a whole group of us got together for a scavenger hunt party, one of the final parties of the summer before we all went off to college. We ended things at the restaurant and people started getting in their cars to go home.
Police believe it was around 1 a.m. as Tricia walked toward the side door of the house, keys in hand, that the killer grabbed her left arm, twisting and breaking it, and then stabbing her 12 times.
I remember my chest just sink the minute I realized that she was gone, and there was nothing I could do to help her.
Detectives interviewed dozens of people. Some parents were too afraid to even let their kids talk. No one seemed to know anything. There were no leads, no arrests.
To be honest, I think we were zonked out for a long, long time. People talk about closure. My experience is there is no closure. That void is always there.
Rick Boccaccio also had no idea how to go on living in the same house where he had found the butchered body of his beautiful daughter. The family moved out for 4 years. Eventually, they decided it was time to come back home. Shortly after, they had an unexpected visitor. Former high school football player Michael Gargiulo, one of Doug Boccaccio's closest childhood friends.
Michael, you've known since he was how old?
Since probably he was in 2nd grade, because he lived on the next street. Michael showed up at the door, and he says, I need to talk to Rick. And I said, well, he's at work, Michael. And he said, well, can I wait for him? I said, yes. He sat and waited for over an hour for him to come home from work, sat at my kitchen table.
I remember walking in the garage door, and I looked at him. He had this look on his face like he was going to say something to me.
But before Michael Gargiulo had a chance to say anything,
the garage door opens, his father and one of his sisters come in and say, we have to leave, Michael. And they picked him up and whisked him out, and the door closed. And I told Diane, I says, golly, that was kind of odd. But the look on his face, Maureen.
At that point, Rick, did you think this kid knows something, or maybe he even had something to do with it?
Yes.
You believe that was the moment that you started to think Michael Gargiulo may have had something to do with her death?
The Boccaccios told authorities, but it was too late. Michael Gargiulo had disappeared. Soon after he left Chicago, Mike Gargiulo turned up in Los Angeles. Like a lot of other dreamers, he wanted to be an actor or a model. Anthony DiLorenzo and Timur Leary worked with Mike Gargiulo in the late 90s. They were all bouncers together at a Hollywood nightclub called the Rainbow Bar and Grill. What did he tell you he was doing out here?
Acting, modeling.
Isn't everybody?
Right. Yep.
He was doing the Hollywood thing.
Yeah.
He's doing the Hollywood thing.
Yeah, he sure is.
Did he have a girlfriend at the time when you were all hanging out?
He always had girlfriends.
Yeah, he always had girls after. He was a good-looking, clean-cut guy. You know, the waitresses were always after him.
But Gargiulo moved on from the nightclub and began working for a heating and cooling company.
Who was the first one among you to meet Michael Gargiulo?
I was.
Chris Duran, Jennifer DeSisto, and Justin Peterson spoke to us in 2010. They were the kind of good friends most young people would be attracted to.
Really, the connection between this big group of friends was kind of partying and having a great time. Very free-spirited lifestyle.
Right.
You were young.
We were young. Their introduction to Mike Gargiulo started with a flat tire.
I'm changing my flat tire, and this guy comes walking down the street. And he was good looking. He stopped and offered to help me change the tire.
At the same time, 22-year-old Ashley Ellerin came out of the house she was renting on the street. Mike Gargiulo noticed.
And Ashley was standing there with me, and he was good looking, and she's beautiful. I was like, no, it's okay, I know how to change a tire. So he stood there talking to Ashley, and they were, talking and flirting. They exchanged numbers, and that was our first meeting.
Did you have any feeling about him one way or the other?
I mean, he was just, a good-looking guy walking down the street offering to help.
Ashley Ellerin, the young woman Mike Gargiulo had immediately noticed, was a part-time fashion student.
She was amazing. I mean, she just had this charisma to her that she could go into a room and walk into the room and just take complete control over the room. And
she was just beautiful and fun and spontaneous.
She had a lot of friends.
Ashley was a 22-year-old, attractive girl living in the Hollywood Hills.
And she liked to have fun?
Absolutely.
She liked to have fun. We had a lot of fun.
The guy they only knew as Mike kept trying to spend time with Ashley.
He called the house a lot after their run-in.
Called and had begun just showing up, uninvited.
Seeing that we were hanging
The friends
out
say one night he walked into the house during a party, sat down and was laser focused on Ashley. But Ashley was not interested. Back then, lots of men were interested in her.
Hollywood is Hollywood. Interacting with celebrities, that is how it is. I mean, they live here.
One celebrity in particular had started calling Ashley. It was then up-and-coming TV actor from that 70s show, Ashton Kutcher.
Why is everything doing that? We had hung out with him a couple of times.
Let's go back to the night that Ashley was supposed to go out with Ashton Kutcher.
I knew they were going to be hanging out.
The next morning, Ashley's roommate, Jen, came home.
I entered the house, and Ashley was laying across the 2 stairs, covered in blood.
The body of 22-year-old Ashley Lauren Ellerin was found by her roommate early Thursday morning.
And that's when I realized that, no, this is not happening. Who could have done this?
When Jennifer DeSisto got home that morning in 2001, she walked into a gruesome and terrifying scene.
At that point, it was just like a sense of trauma just came over me. I thought maybe the person was still there, and I kind of ran out hysterical. I dropped that phone and ended up getting to the car and calling from my cell phone, 911.
Ashley had been attacked just after taking a shower, stabbed 47 times. Her body was lying just outside the bathroom.
Had you ever seen anything like that before in your life?
I absolutely had not, and it still traumatizes me to this day.
Police arrived quickly and started asking questions.
Who could have done this?
That must have been one of the first questions that police asked you, though, was,
yes.
Was anybody angry with her? Did
right.
she have any enemies? It sounds like
right.
such a trite question,
right.
but
right.
you would think that based on what you saw, only someone who hated another person could
right,
do that.
absolutely, yeah. And also it was a given from the get-go that it was obviously someone she was either familiar with or knew to let them in. Because as we had said, the house was kind of double gated.
You believe that Ashley let him in?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Okay, this is Pinehurst Road, and this is Ashley Ellerin's former residence.
Hollywood homicide detective Tom Small says there was little to go on.
No blood splatter outside, no pieces of clothing, no material that would lead you to one particular individual.
No. We had teams of detectives searching the interior and the exterior. We walked the streets, we canvassed every building, door knocked every house.
Were you kind of baffled initially?
Very much so. You know, we were just looking for any type of direction or clues that would to lead to a suspect. So we had to start with the victim and work backwards, find out her associations.
They definitely wanted to talk to the person she was supposed to be on a date with that night.
How you doing? How you doing? Congratulations.
Actor Ashton Kutcher.
And what role has he played in this as a witness in any way?
He is a person in a group of Ashley's friends. He's one of many. And he was a friend of hers.
Kutcher Kutcher and Ashley had plans to go to dinner, but he was running late and kept pushing back his arrival. Kutcher told detectives that at 8:24 p.m. he spoke with Ashley, who told him she'd just gotten out of the shower. Ashton Kutcher didn't actually arrive at Ashley's front door until around 10:45 p.m., at which point he says he was confused because the lights were on, but no one answered. Just as he was about to leave, he glanced through a window and noticed what he thought was red wine spilled on the floor. Turns out it wasn't wine, it was blood.
It just was a very bad scene. A lot of anger, a lot of rage. Somebody had isolated Ashley Ellerin to kill her and was very, very angry when he did it.
Could anyone think of someone who wanted to hurt Ashley?
Not really, almost to a person. Ashley was considered to be, like the life of the party. She had a lot of friends from different walks of life, friends from school, her roommates, celebrity type folks.
Kutcher wasn't the only man police were interested in talking to. This is Mark Durbin, a not-so-famous actor who was also Ashley's property manager. Durbin and Ashley were secretly having a relationship, and he and Ashley had been intimate earlier that evening. But like Kutcher, he had fully cooperated with investigators, and both men were ruled out as possible suspects. While police had no concrete leads, Ashley's friends couldn't shake the feeling that the guy who seemed fixated on Ashley was involved.
In your initial conversation with police, did you mention Michael Gargiulo to them?
Yes. I didn't know his name, but the heating and air conditioning guy.
And did they pay any attention to that?
I know they took note. I don't think they took it very seriously or that much of a threat.
If he was not in their circle of friends, they were creeped out by him.
So when you hear that, does it strike a chord with you?
Well, I mean, it takes a little bit more than that to get focused on somebody as a suspect in a case like this.
Gargiulo wasn't really on Detective Small's radar. Ashley had a large social circle. There were hundreds of people to talk to, and he was just the creepy air conditioner guy. It would take months for police to learn his last name and put him on their list.
It weighed really heavy on me personally, because everybody has the case, and this one was mine. My frustration was, why can't I get the evidence I need to solve Ashley's murder?
Back in Cook County, just outside Chicago, Tricia Piccaccio's murder was unsolved for nearly 10 years. Her mother, Diane, was relentless, hounding investigators.
At least once or twice a week.
And did you feel like anything was being done in that time?
No, but I kept thinking maybe I just keep going and talking to them and keep telling them every little thing that came to mind. I mean, it was just...
It did help some of them.
It helped me probably emotionally because it was almost like I could talk to them. They knew what had happened.
Mm-hmm.
I have the tenacity to keep going until it does happen.
You're not going to give up?
I'm not going to give up, no. My daughter is going to get the representation that she deserves.
Cook County Sheriff's Detective Lou Salo was assigned to the case in 1999.
We had the benefit of technology when we took the case over.
By 2002, new DNA technology allowed investigators to take a fresh look at the evidence collected from the crime scene.
We were hoping to establish some type of DNA profile, give us an idea of a possible offender.
So what's the first big test result you get back, the first new piece of information from this round of DNA testing?
Well, the biggest thing is when we got the unknown male contributor from the fingernails.
Male DNA found on Tricia's fingernails. Now they had to match it.
At that point, we began a DNA campaign of everybody, including the Piccaccio family, her friends of hers that were with her at the road rally that night. We even tested the dog.
You even tested the dog?
Yeah.
Detectives wanted samples from anyone they had talked to back in the day. and Michael Gargiulo was on their list. Detectives heard Gargiulo was now living in Los Angeles, so they went to the LAPD for help.
I had no knowledge they were even coming.
By now, Detective Small had begun to take a closer look at Michael Gargiulo.
And all of a sudden we get a phone call. Cook County's in town. He says, well, who is it you're looking for? And they named Michael Gargiulo.
You said, hey, that's my guy.
They showed up. I held up a photo. I said, is this who you're looking for? And they said, yeah. How do you know him? I said, well, right now he's a potential suspect in a murder investigation. What do you guys have?
Detective Small agreed to help Cook County find Gargiulo and collect a DNA sample. In 2002, almost 10 years after Tricia Piccaccio's murder, the LAPD caught up with Michael Gargiulo.
We obtained Mr. Gargiulo's DNA sample, and
he was cooperative with that.
Not really, but it got done.
The DNA sample was sent to the Illinois State Police Crime Lab. The results were stunning. A match. It was Michael Gargiulo's DNA on Tricia's fingernails. Case closed? Not exactly.
Did you think it was enough to move forward?
Well, I thought it was, but I'm not the attorneys.
Cook County Detective Lou Sala.
It was explained to me, and the explanation made sense at the time, that they just wanted some type of corroborating evidence.
They needed something more than the DNA.
Something more than that.
Because, they said, Michael Gargiulo's DNA might have gotten on Tricia in a way that had nothing to do with the murder.
At the time, he was a friend of the family. You know, and one would have to wonder, could it have gotten there by casual contact?
And had there been casual contact in the hours before or the day before that she was murdered?
There was, the day before.
The day before her murder, Gargiulo was driving with another friend, Scott Olson, when they saw Tricia.
We drove past Piccaccio's house, and who do we see around in the corner, walking away from us? There's Tricia. Mike's driving, he kind of swerves over, slows down, swerves over, gets right behind her, and we saw she was crying. So she's like, hey, give me a ride. I'm like, whoa. Okay, sure, get in. So she gets in the car, said, take her to so-and-so's, take me to so-and-so's house. So we just drove her, we dropped her off, and that was it.
When we spoke to Jack Blakey from the Cook County State's Attorney's Office in 2011, he confirmed that because of that ride and because Gargiulo had spent time at the family home, he cannot be sure if Gargiulo's DNA on Tricia was from the attack.
The evidence just hasn't been there. I wish we could bring closure to her family tomorrow.
So with nothing else tying him to Tricia's or Ashley's death, Gargiulo was only a guy who had the bad luck of knowing two different women who had been murdered in exactly the same way. Gargiulo left Hollywood and continued doing what he always did, never staying in one place for too long.
How come nobody keeps tabs on this guy?
I don't know if they tried. My understanding was he kept kind of a low profile. I think he knew he was on the radar.
Over the next few years, Gargiulo had several girlfriends and even became a father. In 2005, he settled in suburban El Monte, 20 miles east of Hollywood. Then, just before Christmas that same year, in that same neighborhood, there was a murder. The victim was another attractive young woman.
We're talking about a 90-pound, 32-year-old woman who's defenseless, asleep in her bed in her home, where if there's any one place in the world she should feel most secure. That attack is every woman's nightmare.
Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department homicide detective Mark Lilyfield.
This is a building where the murder happened. Behind me in apartment number 20 is where Maria Bruno lived. She had 2-year-old twins, and then I believe a 4-year-old and a 5-year-old.
In the months before her death, Maria and her husband had several violent fights, including one where her husband punched her in the face. She left him and found an apartment in this gated complex.
She had picked that building specifically because it was very secure. You had to either have a passcode or a key to get through the front door, so it was a pretty secure building.
But someone got past that security.
The suspect entered through the kitchen. It appears from the evidence that he obtained a weapon there in the kitchen.
A knife?
Correct. Her body was somewhat mutilated, and you just, that's crap you see in the movies. In real life, that is very rare. It just doesn't happen.
There was very little evidence left behind, except for one blue cotton bootie found in the courtyard outside Bruno's apartment.
Just about where we're standing is where that blue cotton bootie was at.
Right here?
Yeah, right here. And it was kind of out of place. Actually, on the sole of the bootie was a drop of blood, and DNA testing proved that, in fact, it was Maria's blood.
Police immediately took a hard look at Bruno's estranged husband. There was the history of a turbulent relationship, and drops of Maria's blood were found in his car. But Maria's husband told police that earlier that evening, he and Maria had decided to rekindle their relationship. They went to a restaurant where the manager confirmed Maria had cut her finger and was bleeding as they left. And like Piccaccio, then Ellerin, and now Bruno, another vicious murder eventually turned into a cold case. As for Michael Gargiulo, his romantic life was once again in turmoil. He left his girlfriend and new baby in suburban LA and headed to the beach, Santa Monica. And once again, where Gargiulo went, an attack eventually followed.
A young woman is woken up by a man attacking her with a knife.
Santa Monica, April 28, 2008. Another break-in, another brutal assault. But this attack would change everything.
I got the call at about 12:30 in the morning from my sergeant and asked me to come out and respond to a scene of a stabbing or attempted murder.
Then Santa Monica Police Sergeant Richard Lewis.
He gained access into this window, which was open a few inches. And once he got inside there, he then opens the front door and kind of stages it as an escape route. Proceeds into the bedroom where she's sleeping. And what awakes her is a knife being plunged into her.
He just flat out stabbed her.
Right. She was stabbed multiple times in her chest and shoulder and right arm, and suffered several wounds to both of her hands as she's grabbing this knife as it's being plunged down upon her.
The victim was 26-year-old Michelle Murphy.
What can you tell us about her?
She's an incredible young lady, and just someone who's very resilient and decided to fight.
As Murphy, all of 5'1", was fighting for her life, the blade is slipping back and forth, and somewhere in the struggle, the attacker is also cut.
And at some point, there's a lull in the action, and she was able to get her feet up underneath and kick him off of her.
The attacker stumbles off the bed and out of the room. Bleeding profusely from her multiple stab wounds, Murphy runs after the hooded man down the hallway to the front door.
Did he say anything to her ever?
I'm sorry.
He said, "I'm sorry."
I'm sorry.
Then he ran out. Michelle immediately called her boyfriend, who called 911.
She told me that she woke up and there was someone on top of her and she forced them off and they ran out. Okay, we are on our way.
Then the police call Michelle.
Okay, what is your name?
It's very hard to hear her answers.
The fire department is already on the way and we're on our way. What does this person look like?
He definitely had pants and like a long sleeve, like sweatshirt kind of thing. Everything's dark.
You don't know how big this guy was. Hollywood.
Maybe almost, I don't know, like 5'11" or something.
So he comes out this door and there's blood on the steps right outside the front door?
We have some blood on the steps.
Okay.
And then blood on the concrete steps here, leading out down this walkway and into the alley.
So how significant in your investigation and when you showed up that night did you think that blood was going to be?
Huge, huge. About 25 days after submitting my samples to the crime lab, I'm informed by a criminalist where we actually have a hit, a DNA hit.
And who does it match?
Michael Gargiulo.
Conclusively?
Yes.
They were able to make the match because, remember, Gargiulo's DNA had been collected for DNA testing in the Piccaccio case and was already in file. And guess where Gargiulo lived at the time of the attack?
It'd be the second building down, and the first window would be just above that black trash can that you see on the left side.
He could see right into her bedroom?
If she were to have the blinds open, that'd be correct.
That's pretty scary.
Yes, absolutely.
Within 24 hours of making that DNA match, Gargiulo was arrested for the assault of Michelle Murphy.
He was taken into custody.
And what was his response?
His response was, "Which agency is this?"
What did that say to you?
That tells me a lot. It tells me that he wasn't sure of which crime he's getting charged for.
But that there was more than one out there.
To me, that's what that meant, yes.
Sergeant Lewis was reminded of a conversation he'd once had with Detective Lilyfield about a similar murder that had happened 3 years earlier in El Monte, just outside of Los Angeles.
I got a call from Sergeant Rich Lewis from the Santa Monica Police Department. He had a case that was very similar. Luckily, his victim survived, and he had identified a suspect.
And it turns out Gargiulo once lived close enough to Maria Bruno to also watch her. She reported to friends run-ins with a strange guy across the way.
So this is her apartment, and where was Gargiulo's apartment located?
If you turn around and look, it's right over your right shoulder. It's apartment number 34.
So that is up just behind that tree, correct?
Correct, just to the right of that tree. So you've got a clear view, obviously, from his apartment.
Now, the pieces of the puzzle were finally starting to come together. Determined investigators had discovered more evidence. Remember that blue booty found near Maria Bruno's front door? In Gargiulo's old apartment, just across the way.
And sure enough, in the attic of the apartment, we wound up finding a matching booty, a blue cotton booty, just like the same one that we had found at the crime scene, the same manufacturer, the same make, the same model of booty.
And in that 2001 murder of Ashley Ellerin, Gargiulo lived only a couple of blocks away. He was frequently seen hanging out with his dog at this park directly across the street from Ashley's home.
We had information that he's, frequented the dog park, parked his vehicle on occasion over there.
Within a month, Michael Gargiulo was also charged with the murders of Ashley Ellerin and Maria Bruno. When Tricia Piccaccio's family heard that Mike Gargiulo had been arrested in LA, they were certain he would soon be charged with Tricia's murder. But nothing happened. Then, in 2011, 48 Hours ran our first show about the so-called Hollywood Ripper and the unsolved murder of Tricia Piccaccio. Almost immediately after the show aired, a witness reached out to me.
I watched the show, and it was a mugshot of Mike.
Teamer Leary, one of Michael Gargiulo's bouncer buddies from Hollywood.
And did you reach out to Anthony?
I did. I sent him a text.
Yeah, he tried.
Did you know Mike's a serial killer?
Turns out both Teamer and Anthony DiLorenzo had led checkered lives of their own, in and out of jail. But both men were now fathers, and seeing Tricia's father on 48 Hours moved them.
I tried to revive her. That is the worst feeling in your life, when you can't do nothing for somebody you love.
I get emotional because I love my children. And when I look at him and I see that video to this day, I get a pain in my chest that any man would have to miss and love their child like that.
So you're watching it, and we're telling the story, and you have...
I already know.
You already know. You have pieces of the puzzle that we don't even know exist.
Yeah. I said I have to let somebody know what I know.
Here's what Teamer and Anthony knew. They said back in 2000, when they were all working together, Michael Gargiulo told them he had murdered a girl in Chicago.
We're cruising down Sunset. You know, he asked us, but he's like, you guys ever kill anybody? And he's like, I have. And we're like, shut up, shut up.
Here we go again.
He said he buried this. He was, yeah, I buried a bitch. He goes, I left a bitch on the steps for dead.
We put them in touch with Chicago authorities, and soon Michael Gargiulo was indicted for the murder of Tricia Piccaccio, 18 years after her death. Then Cook County State's Attorney Anita Alvarez.
There's new evidence that has just come forward after the 48-hour episode. Really, coupled with the DNA, we feel at this point that we have sufficient evidence.
But the Piccaccios' search for justice was just beginning. There was a long road ahead, full of unexpected twists and turns.
Well, see, my truth is being 100% innocent, being wrongfully charged. All I could do is be calm and fight for my innocence.
Up next,
I hate you, I hate you, I hate you.
The accused Hollywood Ripper faces trial.
This was somebody who was going to take pleasure in plunging a knife into their victim over and over and over again.
Celebrity Ashton Kutcher takes the stand. In a surprise, both the prosecution and the defense make him their star witness.
Ashton Kutcher talked about what would have been his first date with one of the murder victims.
The case will not be easy for the DA.
Zero trace evidence, no eyewitnesses, no fingerprints. Really, they had nothing.
And the defense says there may be other killers out there.
They just have to establish some reasonable doubt in the minds of the jury.
And offer a bizarre story.
Began a circular slicing motion.
Multiple personalities.
It was really a very strange spectacle.
And even possession.
If you are caught red-handed doing something, you can say, I was there, but I wasn't.
You don't want to think that a regular person, can actually commit this horrific of a crime and then just go live day to day. Who does that?
The case of the Hollywood Ripper is not over. Not by a long shot.
It's really, really sick.
This special two-part edition of 48 Hours will continue. This special two-part edition of 48 Hours continues.
He's accused of attacking at least 4 women.
He's been called a serial sexual thrill killer.
This is not a typical murder case. This is a systematic slaughtering of beautiful women by a serial killer.
4 young women, only one survivor.
The Hollywood Ripper is one of the most horrible cases I've ever seen. This is a man who spied on them, who stalked them, and then brutally stabbed them to death. And that's defendant Michael Gargiulo.
Ashley Ellerin, 2001.
Ashley Ellerin was supposed to go on a date with Ashton Kutcher. And he rang the doorbell and nobody answered. He saw what he thought was spilled wine all over the place. Unfortunately, we later learned that that was her blood.
Maria Bruno, 2005.
mother of 4 was brutally murdered inside her El Monte apartment.
She was stabbed to death.
You think she was asleep when she was attacked?
I do.
Michelle Murphy, 2008. This attack would change everything.
How did Michelle Murphy somehow get away from this guy?
She fought. We have some blood on the steps.
Okay.
And then blood on the concrete steps here, leading out down this walkway and into the alley.
So how significant did you think that blood was going to be?
Huge. We actually have a hit, a DNA hit.
And who does it match?
Michael Gargiulo.
I'm Maureen Maher. Since the fall of 2008, I've been covering a man known as the Hollywood Ripper. It's a story that 48 Hours helped to break wide open. Trisha Piccaccio, 1993.
One question has haunted this quiet Glenview community. Who killed Trisha Piccaccio and why?
Who would do this? Why would anybody do this?
What was your reaction when you got a phone call that a witness had come forward to 48 Hours?
I was shocked.
Would you have imagined that a television show would be able to help you solve a crime?
No, but it's never happened to me.
Targeted young women in Illinois and the LA area.
Frankly, it's almost a miracle that these cases were linked together. You say to yourself, who could do this?
Butchering his victim.
Attempted murder of a fourth.
You think, oh my God, it's a monster.
Vicious murders of 3 young women.
Murder and attempted murder.
In a town known for keeping secrets, the murder trial of Michael Gargiulo, nicknamed the Hollywood Ripper, could reveal a hidden life.
Trisha Piccaccio, Ashley Ellerin, Michelle Murphy, and Maria Bruno were all young, attractive, and outgoing.
On May 2nd, 2019, the case against Michael Gargiulo begins. Prosecutors say he murdered 3 women and attempted to murder a 4th.
He staked them out.
Mary Fulgeniti, a former federal prosecutor and 48 Hours consultant.
He stalked them, and then he stabbed them brutally.
Prosecutor Dan Aikman says Michael Gargiulo is a serial killer, attacking 4 women just for the thrill of it from 1993 through his arrest in 2008.
What you will hear is that Michael Gargiulo, for almost 15 years, was watching, always watching. And his hobby was plotting the perfect opportunity to attack women with a knife in and around their homes.
During those years, Gargiulo played high school football, was a wannabe actor, and a repairman. It has taken Gargiulo longer to go to trial than any other inmate in the history of the LA County Jail. Nearly 11 years. This is how he looks now. There have been nearly 100 hearings. He's fired attorneys and even tried to represent himself.
Mr. Rubin and myself have the opportunity to ask questions and cross-examine him.
But now, with the new high-powered court-appointed legal team, the wait is over. The prosecution starts with its strongest case and most powerful witness.
Michelle Murphy, in 2008, was stabbed in her bed in her Santa Monica apartment, right across the alley from Gargiulo's apartment.
After showing photos from her brutal attack, Michelle Murphy, the only woman who survived this alleged serial killer, is called to the stand. There were no cameras allowed in court during Michelle's testimony, but we wanted to share with you some of what she said, her exact chilling words. I grabbed at the knife. I wrapped my hands around the blade. And at some point, 5'1" Michelle Murphy gets her legs up against her chest and shoves the attacker off of the bed. She describes how he runs out of the room, down the hallway. She goes after him, and Michelle says the attacker told her, "I am sorry."
This is Ms. Murphy in the hospital.
Michelle never saw his face, but noticed he was left-handed. In the struggle, the attacker was also cut, leaving his blood, his DNA, all over her bedroom.
Gargiulo's blood and DNA were found on Michelle's bedspread and sheet and in the blood trail across the alley.
After Michelle Murphy testified, the prosecution turned to the other victims to prove Gargiulo's pattern of stalking and stabbing. 3 years before Michelle's attack, Maria Bruno, a mother of 4 young children, was stabbed 17 times.
Maria Bruno was stabbed to death in her El Monte residence.
There's a pool of blood.
Maria Bruno's body was discovered by her estranged husband, Irving, who called 911.
I'm looking at her right now. She's dead. She just barely moved here about less than a week ago.
Gargiulo lived right across the way.
Gargiulo entered Maria's apartment through a window, put on blue surgical booties, and mutilated Maria with a knife as she slept.
The prosecution argues that the pattern and direction of the blood drops show that the killer was left-handed, just like Michelle's attacker, and just like Michael Gargiulo. And this time, the killer left something behind, a blue booty with critical evidence.
Detectives located a blue surgical booty right outside of Maria's front door. Forensic analysis showed that there were drops of Maria's blood on the booty, and Gargiulo's DNA was around the elastic band.
4 years before Maria, there was Ashley Ellerin, a 22-year-old fashion student in Hollywood.
Gargiulo, who lived within a short distance from Ashley's house and frequented the dog park across from her house, injected himself into Ashley's life. On February 21st, 2001, within weeks of Gargiulo fixating on Ashley, surveilling her home at odd hours, Ashley Ellerin was found stabbed to death in the hallway just outside her bathroom. Ashley had been stabbed over 47 times.
As the state lays out its explanation of how Ashley was murdered, an important witness is about to have Hollywood's eyes upon him.
This is Mr. Kutcher. He's Ashley's friend.
Ashton Kutcher is used to being a star, but not a star witness.
Mr. Kutcher is part of the chronology of this case that is offered to show you that there was a very narrow window of opportunity for somebody to get into the house and murder Ashley.
Why is Kutcher called as a witness?
Oh, he's incredibly important to the timeline here and when the murder possibly occurred. And he may have been the last person to actually speak to her before she was killed.
At trial, only still cameras were allowed for his testimony. Kutcher is asked about his planned date with Ashley on February 21st, 2001, the evening she was murdered.
At 8:24 p.m., Ashley talked to Mr. Kutcher on the phone, and they confirmed a plan to go out that night.
Ashton Kutcher was running late, so we called Ashley again at 10:15 to let her know he was on the way. But Ashley didn't pick up. He then drove to her home, knocked on the door, but still got no answer.
He'll testify that at 10:45 p.m. he arrived at the residence and saw what he thought was spilled wine on the floor. We believe now the evidence will show that was actually blood, and Ashley had already been murdered.
A diagram of Ashley's home is shown.
That's her bathroom, where we believe she had just exited the shower and was getting ready to go out with Mr. Kutcher when she was attacked from behind. And then there was a struggle in the area right outside the bathroom where she was stabbed 47 times.
Kutcher testified that after learning about Ashley's murder, he, quote, went to the police. I was like, my fingerprints are on this door. Like, I was freaking out. Although never a suspect, Kutcher was concerned about what he left behind. That's unlike Michael Gargiulo, who was always careful to cover his tracks.
The methodical and systematic slaughter of women, that's what this case is about.
The prosecution painted a portrait of Michael Gargiulo throughout his life. He was violent towards women, interested in serial killer Ted Bundy, and studied forensic science.
Mike was a strange guy.
This is Mirko Hoffman, a man who now describes himself as Gargiulo's former best friend.
Told Mirko that he could get away with committing crimes because he studied forensics.
He would go online, whatever he could find about forensics, and he would learn from people's mistakes, other criminals' mistakes, you know, how to get away with a crime. And he told me if he ever got caught committing any crime, he would just lie until he dies. Lie until you die.
Michael Gargiulo felt confident, arrogant, dare I say, invulnerable.
Prosecutors said Gargiulo also studied a book that taught you how to kill with a knife.
The Anarchist Cookbook talks about knives, the perfect guide to committing some of these crimes, detailing how you go for the throat.
We believe the evidence will show as this is what Mr. Gargiulo was doing.
As for Gargiulo's motive, prosecutors described a serial killer with a sexual bent.
This was somebody who was going to take pleasure in plunging a knife into their victim over and over and over again.
To better understand that, we asked Chris Mohandi to explain. He's a forensic psychologist and expert on serial killers. He is also a consultant to 48 Hours.
Most serial killers are motivated by power. That's at the core of everything.
The prosecution points out that Gargiulo never raped his victims, but he controlled them, and say for Michael Gargiulo that control itself is a sexual thrill.
It's control over life and death, so violence has become sexualized.
According to prosecutors, Gargiulo went after women he found attractive.
Michael Gargiulo noticed Michelle Murphy. Michael Gargiulo noticed Ashley Ellerin. Michael Gargiulo noticed Maria Bruno.
And he stalked them.
He watched and waited and collected real-time intelligence on the victims.
Prosecutors say the spying was all part of his power game and his pattern.
And you've got all this stalking, this watching, surveilling, and fantasizing going on, and the person is doing this repeatedly to try to satisfy their urges. At some point, for some of these individuals, it's not enough to just think about it anymore, and they have to move to the next step. They have to actually kill in order to get the same degree of stimulation.
To really make their point, prosecutors took the jury out of court to see where everything happened. Jurors saw that Michael Gargiulo lived close to all of his victims, close enough to watch them. To start with, Gargiulo lived right down the alley from Michelle Murphy. A few years earlier, he lived within a few hundred feet of Ashley Ellerin. And when he lived in El Monte, his apartment was just across the courtyard from Maria Bruno. To strengthen their argument and really show how Gargiulo had a clear pattern, they also told jurors about a murder over 1,800 miles away.
You will hear that Gargiulo's killing spree started in Chicago in the summer of 1993, almost 26 years ago, when Gargiulo killed his first victim, his neighbor, then 18-year-old Tricia Picaccio.
While Gargiulo is not being tried for Tricia's murder here in LA, prosecutors thought it was essential to tell the jury what happened all those years ago outside Chicago.
Well, it's introduced here for a very limited purpose, and to show that the facts and the pattern in the Picaccio case in Illinois are similar to the California cases.
It was 1993. Tricia Picaccio was just 18 years old, coming home late one night in the Chicago suburbs.
Gargiulo, who was athletic and had trained in martial arts and boxing, grabbed Tricia, who was very petite, snapped her arm, and stabbed her repeatedly in the left breast, arm, and chest. Left her bleeding to death on the doorstep of the family home and fled.
I was the one who found her.
Tricia's father, Rick.
I woke up and I had a cup of coffee and I was going out to my van. And I just happened to see two little tennis shoes sticking up by the side door. And when I saw it was her, I dropped the coffee cup. I died right then and there.
At the time, Michael Gargiulo was a 17-year-old kid living around the corner, one of Tricia's brother's closest friends. When the murder happened, Gargiulo wasn't even a suspect, and the case went cold for years. By 2003, there was new DNA technology.
Eventually, Gargiulo's DNA was found on Tricia's fingernails.
Back then, prosecutors in Chicago did not think that DNA alone was enough to charge him, and the case stayed dormant. In 2011, 48 Hours reported on the case, and a witness came forward to me.
I watched the show.
Timur Leary and Anthony DiLorenzo had once worked with Michael Gargiulo as bouncers in the late 90s at a Hollywood nightclub. They say Michael Gargiulo confessed to them one day when they were driving, telling them that he had killed a girl in Illinois. At the time, it seemed too crazy to be true. Gargiulo had told them a lot of stories.
We're cruising down Sunset. He asked us, but he's like, "You guys ever kill anybody?" And we're like, he's like, "I have." And we're like, "Shut up, shut up."
Here we go again.
He said he buried this. He goes, "Yeah, I buried a bitch." He goes, "I left the bitch on the steps for dead."
We put them in touch with Chicago authorities, and shortly after, Gargiulo was charged with the murder of Tricia Picaccio, 18 years after her death. Now, they are key witnesses at Gargiulo's Los Angeles trial.
In 1997, Gargiulo told his friend Timur Leary, quote, "I stabbed up the girl," end quote. Also in 1997, Mr. Gargiulo told his friend Anthony DiLorenzo, "I actually left the bitch on the step for dead," end quote.
They asked you to identify Gargiulo in the room. Did you make eye contact with Mike?
I did, absolutely. He did not want to look at me. He knew every word that came out of my mouth was true, and there's just no doubt about it.
Each of the Picaccio family members were called to testify, retelling the awful details of finding Tricia on the doorstep of their home. They also described their relationship with her alleged killer.
What was it like for you to be in the room with him?
It's in the room. It's very, very hard.
Tricia's brother, Tommy.
It's difficult. I mean, something like that never goes away.
The Picaccios can only hope that this trial will bring justice for Ashley, Maria, and Michelle. But the defense has another take. They point the finger in a different direction and away from Michael Gargiulo.
They just have to poke holes they've got to raise any doubt. They're going to throw everything at it, the kitchen sink, and they're going to hope that some of that will resonate and it'll raise just a seed, a kernel of doubt in one of those jurors, and that's all they need.
Something accused serial killer Michael Gargiulo knows.
My truth is being 100% innocent, being wrongfully charged.
In recorded jail conversations with 48 Hours between 2009 and 2011, Gargiulo maintained his innocence and a desire to fight the charges.
It's a matter of waiting and knowing that there will be victory because I know I'm innocent, and it's just now putting it down.
Yes.
Putting it down in the courtroom and just being patient.
In the courtroom, his defense attorney, Daniel Nardoni, has a plan. Argue someone else besides his client could have killed these women. He starts with the Ashley Ellerin case.
There's not one single witness called by the prosecution that saw Michael Gargiulo go into the house.
In the Ellerin case, despite all the efforts they put into scouring that crime scene, they came up with zero DNA, zero physical evidence linking him, zero trace evidence, no eyewitnesses, no fingerprints. Really, they had nothing.
Nardoni focuses on the prosecution's celebrity witness, Ashton Kutcher. To everyone's surprise, he says Kutcher is really the defense team's star witness, because Kutcher's account of that evening points to a very specific suspect, and it's not Michael Gargiulo. Instead, it's the manager of Ashley's rented house, this man, aspiring actor Mark Durbin.
I think there's suspicion that Mr. Durbin did this murder.
Mark Durbin testified he was actually having an affair with Ashley and admits they were intimate that very evening, just hours before Ashton arrived. The defense argues that at the time of her murder, Durbin was at Ashley's house. Their proof? Ashton Kutcher's cell phone records.
Ashton Kutcher calls her at 8:24 p.m. We know there's a phone record.
He calls her at 8:24 p.m. Miss Ellerin stated, "I just got out of the shower."
Mark Durbin testifies that he was there when she was taking a shower.
And while he was there, he says Ashley got a phone call, then he left. Nardoni insists it must have been Kutcher's call at 8:24. And that is critical because a neighbor testifies that around 8:25 or 8:30, he heard something.
He hears horrible screaming coming from Ashley's home.
He hears two screams from a woman.
That puts Mark Durbin possibly right in the thick of it at the time of the murder.
Mark Durbin was the only person known to have been with Ashley Ellerin, last person while she was still alive.
But Los Angeles detectives cleared Durbin. He was cooperative, and they didn't believe he had a motive. Still, Nardoni may have succeeded in raising some doubt with the jury.
The defense makes a very big deal about Mark Durbin.
They did a pretty good job, I thought.
And with that, the defense was on to the other case where they saw an opportunity, the killing of Maria Bruno. Same argument, thin evidence.
Not one single person saw Mr. Gargiulo leaving the house.
But there was that blue booty with a drop of Maria's blood on it and Gargiulo's DNA on the elastic band. Nardoni reminds the jury Gargiulo, who lived across the courtyard, was a repairman.
We all know that Michael used booties all the time.
He says the booty probably dropped out of Gargiulo's pocket as he was returning from work and picked up a drop of Maria's blood that was already on the sidewalk. Maria's body had been mutilated, and again Nardoni offered up an alternate suspect. He pointed the finger at Maria's estranged husband, Irving.
The person that did this would to tell you, "I hate you, I hate you, I hate you." Whoever did this made it personal.
Nardoni paints a picture of a fractured marriage and details a previous fight between the two.
Irving Bruno grabbed his wife out of the car, threw her to the ground, and with a closed fist, punched her in the face.
He's got a terrible history of physically abusing her that came out. She said she was scared of him.
In fact, Maria Bruno had recently left him. But Irving told the police that on the night she was killed, he and Maria had rekindled their relationship.
Irving Bruno was the last person with Maria Bruno while she was still alive.
That night, he told police they went out to a restaurant together, returned to her place, were intimate, and then he left. A neighbor says she heard crying at around 1:30 in the morning.
And who's down there at 1:30 in the morning? You know who. Irving Bruno.
And police did find drops of Maria's blood in Irving's car.
They found it on Irving Bruno's baseball cap, a droplet. They found it on the passenger seat, and they found it on the center console.
But a restaurant manager testified he had seen Maria cut her finger earlier that night. Police cleared Irving Bruno. But the defense still tried to persuade the jury.
The defense, though, is still going to try to raise doubt. Just because they were cleared didn't mean they didn't possibly do it.
The defense also drills down on the Tricia Piccaccio case, the 1993 murder outside Chicago. Everyone agrees it was Gargiulo's DNA on Tricia's fingernails. But how did it get there? Nardoni says it could have come from casual contact. Gargiulo had been friends with Tricia's brother, and Tricia had been in Gargiulo's van the day before she was killed.
I have a theory, and that is this, that Tricia sits in the back seat of the family van. You know, she touches it, her clothes pick it up, potentially Mr. Gargiulo's DNA.
To find out how likely that is, we asked Nathan Lentz, a forensic expert at John Jay College of Criminal Justice.
So what we're talking about now is a secondary transfer. A day later, I've never seen a secondary transfer that would last that long. There's just not enough cells that would survive. And especially on your arm, which is touching other things, you're putting on and off your clothes, that rubs off the cells pretty quickly.
And he says casual contact is even more unlikely because at trial, the scientist who matched Gargiulo's DNA to Tricia's fingernails said it was actually a 50-50 mixture of Tricia and Gargiulo's DNA. And that is significant.
Casual contact will leave a few cells here and there. A 50-50 mixture means, in almost all cases, that there was a lot of DNA, a lot of cells from both parties.
That would require contact.
That would require extensive contact. It looks to me that the defendant was scratched by those fingernails. That's what it looks like to me.
While there may have been some doubt about the power of that DNA evidence, no one disagrees that the DNA in the case of the woman who survived, Michelle Murphy, belongs to Michael Gargiulo.
DNA is all over the place. So they've got to somehow figure out, okay, what am I going to do now to defend this particular charge?
The defense's argument surprises everyone.
Michelle Murphy, because of her strength and courage, allowed investigators to work backwards and piece this entire case together.
Michelle Murphy is the sole surviving victim, and it is Gargiulo's DNA that is found all over Michelle's apartment. It's a problem defense attorneys Daniel Nardoni and Dale Rubin must address head-on.
And we know that the evidence in this is stronger. It is much stronger.
Michelle testified that she never saw her attacker's face, but did notice he was left-handed. And there were those words Michelle heard her attacker utter as he ran out the door. "I am sorry."
Michelle Murphy is the only count in which the prosecution has shown that Mr. Gargiulo was in her apartment and attacked her.
In a surprising move, Michael Gargiulo's attorneys do not deny that he attacked Michelle, but insist that he wasn't in his right mind when he did it.
She says that she's fighting off Mr. Gargiulo when all of a sudden He cuts himself. He stands up. He like comes out of a fog, says, I'm sorry, and runs out. Didn't know where he was, didn't know what he was doing.
And to prove it, the defense calls only 2 witnesses at trial, mental health experts.
Both of them have diagnosed Mr. Gargiulo with a mental disease or disorder. He can't premeditate. He can't deliberate. He can't have malice aforethought.
The defense says when Gargiulo attacked Michelle, it was as if another personality had taken over, as if he was possessed.
An experience of possession.
Michael Gargiulo, they claim, suffers from dissociative identity disorder.
Dissociative identity disorder used to be called multiple personality disorder. There's a split whereby they may not have an awareness of when they're doing certain things. This becomes the go-to defense because you can say, I was there, but I wasn't.
They're just saying that they didn't have the mental state to be able to commit horrible crimes.
And how often is that true?
Oh, it's very infrequently. I mean, the only times I've ever seen it actually be successful is when the person was truly like a schizophrenic, had other voices in his head.
The defense can only hope that they have managed to convince the jury. After a 3-month-long trial, 79 witnesses, the presentation of some 350 exhibits, and that field trip to the crime scenes, closing statements begin.
It was 4 female victims, all young, attractive, and outgoing.
Prosecutor Garrett Dameron again lays out the similarities among the victims and the attacks.
These attacks, these murders, took a great deal of strength and athleticism. Each of these attacks were all extraordinarily cold-blooded, torturous. Each of these victims were ambushed. No evidence that there was any theft. Knife is the weapon of choice.
20 similarities between the attacks of the 4 women are described.
Those common characteristics of these crimes point to one man, one killer, Michael Gargiulo.
Adding to their argument,
you know about the DNA,
is the forensic evidence, with Gargiulo's DNA found all over Michelle Murphy's apartment, on Trisha Piccaccio's fingernails, and that slight amount on that booty near Maria Bruno's home.
The prosecution is trying to lump these all together. Why? Because they want to show that it was one attacker, that the pattern, the practice, everything that was done was similar.
You have to judge each case separately.
On the other hand, the defense is trying to do just the opposite. They want to separate these out. They want to show that, no. One's in Illinois. Yes, you may have some in California, but they're separated by years in time. They're not just one attacker.
You can find them not guilty on all these crimes, or you can find them guilty of some crimes and not guilty of other crimes.
The defense just needs to plant a seed of doubt in one of those jurors.
The 3-month trial of Michael Gargiulo has captured the public's attention.
Alleged killer dubbed the Hollywood Ripper claims he is innocent.
He's accused of attacking at least 4 women.
For the families of the victims, the wait for justice has seemed endless. Finally, the finish seems to be in sight as the jury begins its deliberations on August 12th, 2019.
This was probably one of the worst cases. I've worked in this area for a long time as a prosecutor and defense attorney, and I've never seen anything this horrific. So for this jury to have to see all this evidence and day in and day out for 3 months, think about this case and what happened to these victims is really challenging.
But in what might seem like a short time, given such a long trial, after 3.5 days of deliberations, the verdicts are in.
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Michael Gargiulo, guilty of the crime of attempted murder.
Guilty of attacking Michelle Murphy.
Guilty of the crime of first-degree murder.
Guilty of murdering Maria Bruno.
Guilty of the crime of first-degree murder.
And guilty of murdering Ashley Ellerin. Michael Gargiulo sat without emotion as he heard the verdicts. Outside the courtroom, I immediately called the Piccaccios with the news.
It's all done. It's all done here. And now it's your turn. She's sobbing, sobbing, that she's so grateful that they all got their justice and that now it's Trisha's turn.
Remember, Trisha's case was included in California only as supporting evidence of Michael Gargiulo's criminal pattern. It is up to Illinois officials in Cook County to try the case there.
We have to make sure that Cook County now does the job that they need to continue to do, because they need to prosecute him for what he did to my daughter.
Are you confident that he will be brought back to Chicago and he will stand trial?
Talking with the California attorneys and our attorneys in Cook County, I feel confident.
The Piccaccios are cautiously optimistic, as they say they have been let down by the Cook County State's Attorney's Office before. The family has criticized that office for being slow to charge Gargiulo when there was that DNA match in 2003. When we spoke with Jack Blakey from the Cook County State's Attorney's Office in 2011, he told us that DNA match alone wasn't enough to charge Gargiulo.
If there was a DNA match to Gargiulo, why hasn't he been arrested?
The DNA match is consistent with casual contact. We still cannot establish, based on the DNA alone, that he was present at the time of the killing, as opposed to a different time.
But it came out at the Los Angeles trial that an Illinois forensic scientist submitted her findings to Cook County prosecutors in 2003, that it was a 50-50 mixture of Trisha and Gargiulo's DNA on Trisha's fingernails. Remember, the expert from John Jay College of Criminal Justice told us that usually signifies extensive contact.
A 50-50 mixture means, in almost all cases, that there was a lot of DNA, a lot of cells from both parties. That would require extensive contact.
In almost all cases, extensive contact. So why not bring charges?
A lot of prosecutors are hesitant to bring a case when there's not at least one other piece of evidence that helps complete the picture of how the DNA got there.
Does it bother you that the charges weren't filed?
Oh, absolutely. We had him in 2003.
You had him?
It didn't work out.
For Lou Sala, the lead detective on the Piccaccio case, the focus now is seeking closure to the case that has haunted him through the latter part of his career and into retirement.
Now that LA is done, they fully intend to extradite him back here. And I think it has to be done for the Piccaccio family. Their verdict is still coming.
But the trial in LA did give the Piccaccios a chance to meet the men who changed the course of Trisha's case, Teamer and Anthony, who came forward with Gargiulo's statements, evidence that pushed authorities to finally charge Gargiulo with Trisha's murder.
So you have both met the Piccaccios now?
Yes.
Yeah. What was that like?
It was hard. I see out of the corner of my eye, I see them, and I spun around, and I was like, Rick? And he instantly knew who I was. He hopped up and gave me a hug.
I feel for them so much.
Yeah.
That, they were just sent through the ringer the whole time.
It's always painful.
Yeah.
It will always be. I just tell people it's something that I have to live with now and deal with now and try to cope with for the rest of my life.
Trisha's remembrance book from her funeral provides bittersweet memories.
And so there's family in here, obviously, and lots of friends. I mean, hundreds of people.
It's filled with kind comments about their beloved daughter, but also this.
Back here, what is that name?
Yeah, that's Michael Gargiulo signed that.
It has been a 26-year-long journey from when that book was signed by the man the Piccaccios now believe killed their daughter. Gargiulo is now a convicted murderer of 2 other women the Piccaccios, through Trisha, helped to find justice.
She helped these other girls. She was a very always like to help people, and I just want justice to get done because that's what my daughter deserves.
Personally, I could sort of relate to Kathy Blair and just thinking about what that would be like as a woman to be home alone.
That is the boogeyman story for
is.
every woman,
It's
right?
awful.
An intruder is in your house.
Yeah.
Someone is stabbing you.
What's happening? I said, my mom is dead. Someone broke in and killed my mom.
This is a case that sticks with you throughout your life. My name is Derek Israel. I was working in the homicide unit when this case occurred.
My name's Kerry Scanlon, and I was the lead investigator on the Kathy Blair murder.
Kathy was a larger than life. She's my big sister. I have always thought everything Kathy did was amazing. How would you describe her from a student's perspective?
She was so kind, just believed in me wholeheartedly. It still makes no sense.
Who kills a choir director? Who does that?
A monster.
I get notified that there's been another murder. The victims are an elderly couple.
They were the best parents you could ever want.
They were just sweet people, like anybody's grandmother and grandfather.
Right from the get-go, it started sounding really familiar.
It's so violent, and it's eerily similar to Kathy Blair's.
And when we saw the connection, we just continued to work the investigations together.
You know, Carrie and I both kind of came to the conclusion that there was a serial killer working here in Austin.
I was out testing a thermal scope. I needed to get some video of some deer.
Rob Leaf has this thermal imaging scope. It's a night vision rifle scope.
So I saw the car pull up and park. I zoomed in with the scope, and by the time I had zoomed in, someone had gotten out, walked over to the sidewalk.
That is just unbelievably chilling.
The last thing they were expecting was high-resolution thermal video.
This video showed the murderer walking towards Kathy Blair's house.
The actual killer?
The actual killer.
These days in Texas, it seems like all roads lead to Austin. The sleek skyline of the Lone Star capital glittering. A boomtown that welcomes newcomers chasing dreams. It's a city charged with life, An unlikely place to find tragedy as dark as the death of a dreamer like Kathy Blair. She loved life. You loved being around her. What were the things that were important to her? She had, I think, a sense of justice, right and wrong. Kirsten Matheson is Kathy's younger sister. She was bossy. And even as kids in California, it was clear Kathy had a passion. She was always singing. She had a God-given talent, which was her voice. It was music that led Kathy to Austin. Kathy went to UT Austin to get her master's degree in vocal performance. She loved Austin. But love didn't always work out for Kathy. She divorced twice. Still, her affair with Austin held firm. And by 2013, Kathy was renting a house on a quiet street here on Tamarack Trail. It was home. She loved the people here. She loved the vibe. In a city known around the world for music, Kathy Blair fit right in. She had melody and rhythm in her soul. But you wouldn't find her singing the blues here on Austin's famed 6th Street. Instead, she chose a more spiritual stage for her talents.
Christian Choral Society was a positive social setting. The kids were kind to each other.
Barbara Sally's daughter was one of hundreds of students touched by Kathy's talent as a choir director and teacher.
I think she lived, breathed, ate, slept music.
Barbara, along with Kathy's student, Kristen DeGroot, met with us to share their memories of Kathy.
She was so kind, just believed in me wholeheartedly, which was something I really needed.
And for Kristen, Kathy was a role model.
She and I were the same. Music needed to be in our lives or we would die.
She was their teacher and their mentor. One of her friends called it the Kathy Nation. The Kathy Nation? The Kathy Nation. It was December 6th, 2014. Kathy's son Joe was staying with her while waiting for his assignment from the Navy. After a night out, he came home to Tamarack Trail. What he found was shattering and echoed across that Kathy Nation.
I think my mom is dead. There's a lot of blood. I think someone broke in and killed my mom.
Joe, what's your mom's name?
Her name is Kathy Blair.
This case was clearly different, really, right from the get-go.
Starting with the location.
Oh, this is a nice neighborhood. This is a place where people, I think, feel safe.
Up until this case, which would frighten and chill Austin and shock veteran detectives Scanlon and Israel.
One of the first things I thought of, I'm like, well, why this house?
Yeah, why this house?
There's nothing that makes this house stand out from all the other ones. This is the living room right here.
Then, in Kathy Blair's bedroom,
there's a full-size jewelry case right here, large drawers. All the drawers have been pulled out and they're stacked up. So it's like someone dumped them out and then put them in a pile right here.
someone who had time to do that.
Correct.
A jewel thief who had time. Because Kathy Blair was already dead.
This murder started right here on the bed.
53-year-old Kathy Blair lay alone, asleep in her own bed. She awoke to the ultimate nightmare.
Yeah, Kathy Blair fought like hell.
Choked, stabbed, and finally slashed across the neck.
The wound is a fatal wound, but she still has time, to put up that fight.
She fought for her life. Kathy's here, and there's blood all around her.
So much blood that it formed the timeline of a murder.
There's a light switch. Now, that light switch, we saw blood, like a blood swipe. That told us that the perpetrator had come in here after the murder and switched that light on. There are more blood swipes on these drawers. And that tells me the murder of Kathy Blair occurs before these drawers are removed.
Word soon spread across Austin and across Kathy Nation.
I just said, no, that's not what happened. That cannot possibly be what happened.
Was Kathy Blair the kind of woman who might have an enemy who would do that?
No. She didn't have a malicious bone in her body.
Why does someone come in here and murder someone in order to steal a little bit of jewelry? You know, it doesn't make sense.
It would be the first in a hideous series of senseless events.
It's just one of those moments where you're in disbelief. You think you're living in a dream. This does not happen.
But it did happen, and the killer left almost no evidence, no DNA.
No fingerprints
No fingerprint.
and no blood from the killer.
No.
Israel and Scanlon would need all their street smarts and then some, because just 9 days later,
I get notified that there's been another murder.
for Austin detectives Israel and Scanlon, images of Kathy Blair's death were harrowing.
Attacked in the middle of the night, and it was a really horrific scene.
But there was no physical evidence from a killer who made virtually no mistakes. And that meant there was no clear suspect. Then suddenly, the search for a suspect changed in a way no one could imagine. It was around 1:30 a.m. on the night that Kathy Blair died. One of her neighbors was out for a late-night walk. What he saw and what he did would give the detectives their first big break in the case.
I was out testing a thermal scope. I needed to get some video of some deer, and we've got some deer up and down the street.
Rob Leaf lived a few short blocks from Kathy Blair.
So it's a thermal scope, so it picks up a heat signature.
Wow. It's like daytime. Except it was the dead of night, and Rob was only looking for deer.
I saw the headlights of a car coming up. I saw the car pull up and park, and
On this street?
On this street.
Rob kept recording. This is video he recorded that night with a scope like this one.
I zoomed in with the scope, and by the time I had zoomed in, someone had gotten out and walked over to the sidewalk.
You can flip the setting to red to see the image more clearly. Did you focus in on the car?
I first focused in on the person, and he turns left on Tamarack.
Kathy Blair's street. The next day, Rob flew to Las Vegas on a planned trip with old friends.
Reading the news on my phone and saw a murder story. I clicked on it, and I saw the address.
Rob raced back to Austin. He checked the video of that stranger on his street.
And I called Austin police.
And how important does the video end up being in Kathy Blair's case?
Very, very important.
The video was tantalizing, but blank on images that did not give off heat. So you couldn't actually identify the man, a license plate number, or even if there was anyone else inside the vehicle. Still, there was one important clue.
It gave us an idea of what kind of vehicle our murder suspect arrived at the crime scene with, and it was a sedan of some sort.
These cops needed much more evidence. Then, 9 days after Kathy Blair's murder, in another peaceful Austin neighborhood just 15 minutes from Kathy's home, they would get it.
The victims are an elderly couple, murdered overnight.
Viciously.
Viciously.
Sidney Jr., Johnny, and Brenda want their parents to be remembered as the outstanding people they were, not the grim headlines they became. Billy and Sidney Shelton were hardworking and happily married for 64 years.
We were never rich, but not once did Daddy ever complain about it. Not once did Mama ever complain about it.
A life well lived and peacefully slowing down. Billy was 83, her husband Sidney, 85.
These are sweet people that'll, send you on your way with some cookies.
Home nurse Dow Catrola was making her scheduled visit on December 15, 2014.
I knocked, nobody answered. Front door was splintered. It was clearly had been busted open.
Dow nervously headed to the Sheltons' modest bedroom.
And their room had been ransacked, and then to the left, I saw him on the bed, and I ran. I just turned around and I ran.
Sydney and Billy Shelton had been beaten and stabbed.
The knife is still present
Yes.
in one of the victims.
That's correct.
Is it clear that it's also a burglary?
Yeah, I was seeing some of the same things.
The same things found at Kathy Blair's murder scene, starting with an empty jewelry box.
And again, the drawers were pulled out, they had been emptied and stacked.
3 people had been slaughtered in their own beds. The crime scenes were eerily similar, and investigators were privately wondering, was there a serial killer loose on the streets of Austin?
If word gets out that there's a serial killer, it kicks it to an entirely different level.
So investigators kept their worst fears to themselves. But why would any killer target Kathy or Billy and Sydney, who cops determined didn't even know each other?
None of these people had any enemies that we could figure out. What is it that connects these people together besides the killer?
Every lead was chased down. Then, almost 3 weeks after Kathy was killed, the name of a stranger surfaced. Tim Parlin. He'd done yard work at Kathy's house, and a friend reported Parlin was weird and rude.
I go to our computer system.
It was a simple and easy search. Tim Parlin had spent decades in prison.
And he stole jewelry.
And he stole jewelry
Specifically jewelry.
at night.
Are you hopeful at this point?
Yeah, I am.
So this is the in-town suites. Tim Parlin, where he was living at the time the murders happened.
Israel and Scanlon went to look up the lifelong convict. The detectives snapped these photos of Tim Parlin.
I told him, we're homicide detectives.
So he asked us a few questions as well.
About the murder?
Well, yeah, like, so how'd she die?
Wow,
You know,
that's bold.
You know, stuff like that.
He's sussing it out to see
What we know.
cat and mouse.
It is.
Parlin spoke to the cops in the hotel's parking lot, but when they asked to see his room, he refused, claiming his wife was inside and asleep.
And you drive away, and what's the conversation?
I said, this is our guy.
You did?
Yeah, and Derek says, I don't know yet.
A return trip to the in-town suites just a few days later pays off. Parlin wasn't home, but his wife was.
Explain what we were investigating, and she knew the Sheltons. His wife knew the Sheltons.
Tim Parlin's wife knew the Sheltons from church, and Tim Parlin had worked in Kathy Blair's yard. It was tenuous, but it was a connection.
She gave us permission to search the apartment.
Did you find anything?
We did a pawn receipt
This is that pawn receipt.
for a piece of jewelry, a nugget pendant. And it turns out that pendant belonged to Kathy Blair. It was pawned on the same night that Kathy Blair was murdered.
We found out that his sister had a green Toyota.
Parlin had been using his sister's car, a green Toyota. Its outline appeared similar to the car in Rob Leaf's video, and one caught on security footage approaching that Austin pawn shop less than 24 hours after Kathy was murdered.
We took it, we had it towed.
Towed and tested. On the passenger seat, traces of dried blood.
Blood belonged to Kathy Blair that was in that car.
Austin was on edge,
Kathy Blair was found dead inside her home.
hoping for an arrest.
The wait for justice has been troubling for her students, family, and friends. My name is Hema Muller, and I'm an anchor at CBS Austin News. It was very, very shocking in the community, and it was really unsettling.
But now justice was closing in on one man, Tim Parlin.
But you're thinking one guy still.
Oh, yeah.
When Kathy Blair's blood was found in Tim Parlin's car, detectives Israel and Scanlon were convinced that he had killed her.
At that point, we're all jubilant. We're super excited. We got our guy.
Parlin fit the bill perfectly. He had done yard work for Kathy Blair, and was a career criminal with a long rap sheet of burglaries.
Now I just need to question him, confront him. Hopefully he'll confess, but if he doesn't, we have hard physical evidence to tie this guy to the murder.
Israel had Parlin arrested for an unrelated parole violation and brought in for questioning.
Seemed like a pretty short and straight road to charging Tim Parlin with murder. It turned out it wasn't a short road, and it certainly wasn't a straight road.
The first step was to get Parlin to corroborate some of the details of Kathy's murder.
I just straight up told him that, we knew that he had killed Kathy Blair.
What's his response?
I didn't do it. And this was the thing he really liked to say. These hands didn't kill anyone.
So the detectives asked him who did, but Parlin wasn't giving up that information so easily.
So after hours of this conversation, he finally says, okay, I'll tell you who it was. And that's when he said, Sean Gant Benalcazar.
Who is that?
That's what I said. Who is that?
Did you think he was stalling?
Oh, yeah. This sounded completely made up. And I knew as soon as he said it that he had screwed us.
Because now you had to
Because now we got to
down.
go hunt some mystery guy down and prove that he didn't commit a murder.
With their lead suspect behind bars for now, the detectives reluctantly contacted Parlin's mystery man. Sean Gant Benalcazar had never been in trouble with the law. He had a degree in microbiology, was once a high school science teacher, and seemed an unlikely acquaintance of a serial jewel thief.
This guy lived in Galveston. He didn't cause any trouble.
Gant Benalcazar readily agreed to meet with them that night at the Galveston Police Department.
Go see the cops, dude.
All right.
We're investigating a murder in Austin, and in particular, we're looking at Tim Parlin as the person that we believe committed the murder.
I'm completely in the dark on this. Who was murdered?
He tells the detectives he barely knows Parlin, that he just met him a few months earlier when his sister began dating Parlin's nephew.
So we started talking, okay, well, when's the last time you were in Austin? Well, I've been in Austin a few times for the last month. He was in town during the weekends of both of those murders. And on top of it, he was staying with Tim Parlin.
The thing is, honestly, I want to help you guys out because this guy, wolf in sheep's clothing, basically, didn't tell me anything about his past. And I'm starting to feel like he set me up like a patsy or something.
The detectives knew from Parlin's criminal record that he did have a history of being a master manipulator.
Did Tim ever approach you about doing burglaries?
And before long, the mystery man who initially said he knew nothing slowly started to crack. Gant Benalcazar now says he was sitting in the car when Parlin went into Kathy Blair's house.
So where are you sitting in the car?
Passenger seat.
Well, if he's sitting in the passenger seat, then why is there blood in the passenger seat?
But Gant Benalcazar had an explanation. He says Parlin came back to the car clutching a bloody pillowcase.
Came back with a sack, had blood on it, threw it in the passenger floorboard, and I took a peek at it, had jewelry in it, and I didn't want anything to do with it.
When did you figure out that it had something to do with the murder?
The fact that it had blood on it was not a good sign.
Then, about 4 hours into the interview,
No, I'm just wondering, use the restroom.
as he walked down a hallway,
And he was walking in front of me. I looked up and it just, I got a chill because I was like, that's the same walk as the guy in the video.
remember that spooky thermal video that the cops think accidentally caught Kathy Blair's killer ambling down the sidewalk?
It's just the broadness, the deliberate steps. I thought it was him. I definitely believed it could be him.
Was it actually Gant Benalcazar and not Parlin who had gone into Kathy's house?
We started pursuing, the line of questioning along the lines of maybe he was in the house.
Did he bully you into going into the house, or?
I was scared, and he was taking a threatening tone. He told me to go in the house and get the stuff.
And finally, he admitted, I did go into the house.
And I did steal the jewelry. Came in through where? The back door, you said?
Yeah, it was open.
Okay. Open, unlocked?
Unlocked, yeah. I looked around and kind of prowled and snuck through quietly. I turned on a couple lights in rooms where I didn't see her. I found the room where she was, and she was fast asleep. That was the room her jewelry box was in.
Okay.
And so I opened the jewelry box, took the stuff out, put it in the thing. Maybe he went back, I don't know, but I didn't kill her.
Yeah, I told him that's impossible. Everything you said is true, except that it's not possible she was still alive when you left. And I explained that the person who turned on those light switches you talked about turning on, the person who removed that pillowcase you talked about removing, the person who removed those drawers you talked about removing, that person had Kathy Blair's blood on his hands. So the person who did all that killed Kathy Blair. I kept pushing him for the reason. Something happened in that room when you were there. What happened? And that's when he said, I was standing there, I was looking at her.
With no room left to lie, he breaks down.
She woke up, she lunged at me, grabbed the knife, started trying to wrestle it out of my hand. And then it was a struggle, and I stabbed her in the neck.
The confession came unexpectedly. The witness was now the prime suspect.
We had gone to clear the guy, and instead he confessed to capital murder.
Gamp and Alcazar kept talking and claimed that after murdering Kathy Blair, he handed off her jewelry to Parlin.
You didn't get to keep any of it? No, he didn't give me anything. I got nothing. You're gonna have to ask him where he fenced it.
Sean Gamp and Alcazar appears to have gained absolutely nothing from this senseless murder.
I've never met anyone who would go into someone's house and sneak in at night and murder them in their bed.
For what reason?
None. For their own gratification. That's it. We're going to place you under arrest for capital murder.
Detectives immediately read Gamp and Alcazar his rights, but they still wanted to learn what he knew about the murder of the Sheltons.
We started talking again, asked him about the Sheltons.
Try as they might, Gamp and Alcazar wasn't talking anymore.
Well, I wasn't there for that one. I don't know anything about that one. By this point, everyone is exhausted. So eventually, he terminated the interview.
He said, I'm done.
Done.
Wish this all had never happened.
After the arrest, Detective Scanlon made this video of Gamp and Alcazar on his cell phone. His hunch seemed right.
That's the moment that you think it's him.
That's when I thought it was him.
2 men are in jail in connection with the murder of a beloved choir teacher.
4 days later, Austin police announced that they had made 2 arrests.
30-year-old Sean Gan Ben-Alcazar of Galveston is charged with capital murder.
49-year-old Timothy Parlin is also expected to face charges related to Blair's murder. Sean Gant Ben-Alcazar, he was a UT graduate. He had no criminal record of any kind. How did he get involved with a crime like this?
Tim Parlin had an answer. Later, while in custody, Parlin admitted to the cops that he had driven Gamp and Alcazar to Kathy Blair's house and to the Shelton residence on the nights they were murdered. And Parlin says he knew all along that Gamp and Alcazar had killed all 3 of them. Investigators now thought they understood what had happened.
Sean murdered the Sheltons. Tim Parlin was a party to that murder. And he planned it. He facilitated it, he profited from it, he assisted in it.
But you are 100% convinced that it was Sean who murdered that couple?
Yes.
Will he ever be brought to trial for it?
It seems unlikely.
Unlikely because there was no direct evidence linking Gamp and Alcazar to the Shelton murders. And he would always deny he had killed them. Prosecutors would focus instead on building their strongest case, using Gamp and Alcazar's confession to convict him of killing Kathy Blair. But when Sean Gamp and Alcazar finally gets his day in court, no one could have anticipated what would happen next.
Makes you worry because this guy cannot be out on the streets.
Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We're here to start the trial in the state of Texas versus Sean Gant Ben Alcazar this morning.
3 years after Sean Gant Ben Alcazar confessed to the murder of Kathy Blair, his trial begins.
Did then and there intentionally commit murder by causing the death?
You never know what a jury's going to do, but it was a very, very strong case.
You're all here today. Assistant DAs Andrea Austin and David Livingston present the state's case.
The man who sits among us in this courtroom, the defendant, Sean Gant Ben Alcazar, is Kathy Blair's killer.
How hard was it to be there during that trial?
It was really hard. There were some pictures throughout that I saw that I can't unsee.
There was a car that parked while I was on the walk.
Kathy's neighbor, Rob Leaf, testifies about the video he recorded on the night she was murdered.
And by the time I zoomed back in, someone was already out of the car and was crossing onto the sidewalk.
That someone, the prosecutor tells the jury, was Sean Gant Ben Alcazar on his way to murder Kathy Blair.
I just kind of looked through the rooms, you know, and I turned on a couple lights in rooms where I didn't see her.
The prosecution's case hinges on Gant Ben Alcazar's rambling 5-hour confession, where he describes breaking into Kathy's house.
She woke up, she lunged at me.
He had a knife out. They fought over the knife.
And I stabbed her in the neck.
He didn't just kind of confess. He straight up confessed to all the details of killing Kathy Blair.
Sign the date right here.
That confession was vital to the prosecution's case.
He gave enough details in this confession that were kept out of the media so we could show the confession was from the actual killer and that he knew enough about this crime to have either been there or done it himself.
There's no question that this is a horrible, horrible crime.
But Gant Ben Alcazar's defense lawyer, Ariel Payan, makes a bold accusation right off the top. That damning video?
She just was trying to fight the knife away from me, and I was...
It was all a lie. A false confession coerced by detectives Israel and Scanlon.
No, I'm just wondering, did I use the restroom?
The defense tells the jury that during that 5-minute bathroom break in the hallway, when Gant Ben Alcazar was not being recorded, detectives threatened him.
Law enforcement went down there, we believe the evidence will show, with the express idea, plan, purpose, and intent to try to get him to confess to something he didn't do.
They have to come up with something. They have to argue that it's an involuntary statement, but we obviously knew that wasn't true.
The exact words were, "This is important and you're not going anywhere until we finish."
Gant Ben Alcazar takes the stand to blame the cops for his confession.
That if I didn't explain a reason for having done it, even though I didn't do it, I would get the death penalty.
And he maintains that it was actually Tim Parlin who killed Kathy Blair on that chilly December evening back in 2014. Were you worried the jury might
You always have to worry with juries.
You don't get blood on your hands and put it on a jewelry chest.
At closing arguments, prosecutors insist Gant Ben Alcazar voluntarily confessed and offered details about the crime only the killer could have known.
I think it comes down to credibility.
And hopefully are sitting there thinking, this guy confessed, why are we here?
The case goes to the jury.
When the hours started ticking away, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
You feel awful.
Were you worried?
Yes. The idea that he would get out is just unthinkable. I mean, Sean is going to kill somebody else if he got out.
After 19 hours of jury deliberations,
This time I'll declare a mistrial.
a mistrial. The jury cannot reach a verdict.
If one person held out, she didn't want to consider the confession.
I mean, look, that's what this system is about. We're required to get a unanimous verdict. We didn't get a unanimous verdict.
How hard was it to hear that there was a mistrial and you would have to go through it all over again.
Really hard. Yeah, that was tough.
With a retrial in the works and Tim Parlin's trial less than a month away, prosecutors were worried. Could they get any jury to convict either of these men?
Good morning. This man, Timothy Parlin, knew that Sean Gant would go in and murder Kathy Blair.
With Sean Gant Benelkazar's mistrial still fresh in her mind, prosecutor Andrea Austin is determined to put Tim Parlin away for life. He stands trial for both the murders of Kathy Blair and the Sheltons.
In Texas, if you were part of the crime, then you are also guilty of that crime. You can convict him even if you don't believe he stepped foot inside that house.
Because he was there and he participated.
Correct.
Right.
I'm going to ask you to find him guilty of capital murder.
Detectives were convinced Gant Benelkazar had killed the Sheltons, but had no evidence to charge him with their murders. So Tim Parlin would prove to be an easier target for prosecutors. Parlin admitted he drove Gant Benelkazar to both murder scenes, and the car Parlin was driving had Kathy Blair's blood in it.
Oh, he did much more than sit in the car. He's the one who targeted Kathy. He's the one, for whatever reason, said, hey, you know what, this would be a good person for you to murder.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Parlin's lawyer, Keith Lauerman, argues that despite his client having confessed to driving Gant Benelkazar to both murders, there is no evidence placing Parlin inside the two houses.
He never set foot in either one of these houses. And at the very end, you're going to realize that this man and those hands never participated in any murders.
After a 9-day trial, the jury doesn't take long to reach a verdict.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Timothy Parlin, guilty of the offense of capital murder.
Guilty. Parlin is sentenced to mandatory life in prison without the possibility of parole for his role in the murders of Kathy Blair and Sidney and Billy Shelton. 5 months later, Gant Benelkazar went to trial a second time for the murder of Kathy Blair.
The nerves were much higher the second round.
Well, there's a lot at stake.
There's a lot at stake.
The vehicle parked on the side of the street. It wasn't in front of a house.
Again, Rob Leaf's testimony is critical for the prosecution.
And that at some point, did you see an individual get out of that car?
Yes, sir, I did.
I want you to watch this.
It was a struggle, and I stabbed her in the neck. I didn't.
Look what he does with his hands. He's retrieving a memory, right? Involuntarily, he's doing this. He remembers doing because he's the one who murdered her.
The police wouldn't let me go, is my understanding.
Once more, Gant Benelkazar swears the cops coerced his confession.
And I come out of the bathroom, they keep saying, oh, we know you did it, there's no doubt you did it, and they keep saying it, and I just got worn down.
This time out, the jury deliberates less than 3 hours.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Sean Gant Benelkazar, guilty of the offense of capital murder.
We poured our emotions out into this case.
It was justice delayed and, yeah.
But delivered.
But delivered.
Like Tim Parlin before him, Sean Gant Benelkazar was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
We're pleased. We miss Kathy. This isn't going to bring her back. Our hearts are never going to completely heal.
A few months after the verdict, I spoke with Gant Benelkazar via a prison video phone. I wanted to ask why. Why would a guy who'd never been in trouble with the law suddenly turn into a vicious killer? Instead, with no evidence of any remorse, he repeated what he told the jury, that he was innocent, the cops had forced him to confess, and that Tim Parlin was the one who had killed Kathy Blair.
When I went to go see him at 4 a.m.,
he said, well, we're going to go get breakfast, and drove me out to the place, and then said that he had killed her and told me about it.
Tim Parlin confessed to you that he killed Kathy Blair.
Yeah, that's right.
How could you have known the movements of the killer?
Anything that I said was something that either, Tim told me or I just made up.
And not surprisingly, when I visited Parlin at a prison in Northeast Texas,
Hello, how you doing?
he pointed the finger at Gant Benalcazar and claimed he knew absolutely nothing about the murder of Kathy Blair. After Sean viciously kills Kathy Blair, gets back in your car and drives away, and he goes back to Galveston.
He never said a thing.
He never said a thing.
He never said.
Then he comes
stone
back.
cold individual, actually.
Right. You've been described as the master manipulator. That you talked him into doing it.
My IQ is very low, and I have a big heart.
I don't believe that.
It is. It's very low, actually, and I have a big heart, so I'm not the mastermind behind anything.
You're just a big teddy bear behind bars?
Yeah, pretty much.
Rob Leaf is the accidental hero of this story. Someone who never knew he'd be called upon to help solve a murder. And you ended up leaving the neighborhood.
I did.
Needed a change.
I did, absolutely.
I would not be where I am as a professional actor and musician without her influence.
Kathy Blair's student, Kristen DeGroot, is moving to New York to pursue her dream of a career in music.
One of my greatest regrets is that I never was able to tell her that she did this for me.
How proud do you think she would be of you?
I hope she'd be really proud of me.
They're just evil people. In the end, there's just two broken human beings who, basically put a path of destruction through, two families.
Two families who will forever share the same tragedy.
They were the best parents you could ever want.
I just miss her. And at the end of the day, she's gone, and I can't call her tonight.
"48 Hours. Don't miss an episode.